Fade to Black is back. How you doing, everybody? Welcome to everybody listening across the United States, all around the world. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Tuesday, October 7th. 278 days into the new year. Live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in sunny Burbank, California. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. Welcome. Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around the world, fighting the good fight for us. Defending that Constitution of ours. And if you don't think you have freedoms, you have no idea. Let's go. Let's get this one cracking. Updated the podcast today. Put up a bunch of the old classics today. Go subscribe to the podcast. Go to jimmychurchradio.com. Do it. Nothing will replace this, the live show. Man, looking over at Twitter. That's what I'm talking about. Right before the show, I was like, where's everybody at? Mike Barrett chimes in, hey, man, I'm going to come hang out. You look lonely. You sound lonely. And then all of a sudden, bam! Oh, where was everybody hiding? Look at that. Jeremy Maddox just showed up. All right. Let's get this one cracking. A little side note. Graham Hancock, who is joining us tonight for the full show, was on an expedition across the United States, went into hiding. We had today slotted for him. And couldn't chase him down. So we were going to have Thomas Reed up in October, later on in the month. Moved him up to today. And then Graham emails last night, hey, man, I'm back, man. Are we still on for tomorrow? So I called Mr. Reed today, and I will say this, a total gentleman. And it worked out for the better for a lot of different reasons. It's called synchronicity. Always strike when the iron's hot. That's what you do. And he wanted to bring on Travis Walton with him on the show. Travis has got a big seminar he's doing, I think November 7th or, later on. And so we booked Travis and Thomas Reed together on October 20th. And it just worked out. So that's why we went back to the old schedule. I had already announced last week that Graham was going to be with us this week. We're now back. Everything is on schedule. All right. See, I'm revealing stuff, the inner workings of what goes on here. So I can't wait for Thomas and Travis, the two T's, and that'll be October 20th. All right. So that's what's going on, and that's why it happened like it did. So tonight, Graham Hancock will be with us for the duration of the show live from the East Coast. Okay? All right? Does that satisfy everybody's curiosity about what? So there you go. Again, Tom Reed, total gentleman, moved, but we're back to where we were originally. All right? Let's get this cracking. Let's go. We got a lot to do tonight. We have a lot of stuff to get through. Okay? All right? Follow us on Twitter, @JChurchRadio. Come and hang out in the sandbox. @JChurchRadio is what you want to do. Okay? I don't know what's going on out there in Twitter world. Follow us here. That's where the action is. Every night, 7 to 10. Right here. Hashtag DMRadioNet. Hashtag DMRadioNet. Come check it out. You have to come and see what this party's all about. We have a good time. We're friendly. And the fate or nots, it's just a family that you just have to come in and experience for yourself. It's really cool. Earlier today, I was on with Carrie Cassidy, Project Camelot, live. And I had never done a streaming live video show. And from what I understand, I needed to shave and wear makeup. But so there it goes. I'll blame it on the lighting. Streaming adds 10 pounds. Had a great time with Carrie. And it is so fun and so easy to be on the other side of the mic. I got to tell you right now, the other side of the mic, just answering questions and letting your brain go is cool. Man, I wish I could do that every day. Oh, man. This is great. That was fun. And Carrie is inquisitive. And we converse well together. And I enjoyed pushing back and her pushing back the other direction. It was really cool. So I don't know if you caught it. I don't know if there's a replay. I don't know who had a chance to listen to it today. I put it up last night or yesterday around the web and did it today. And I hope everybody got to go in and peep that out because it was a lot of fun. Okay, let's go. Let's get it cracking. Today, John Cougar Mellencamp is 63 years old. 63. Cougar, he's from Indiana. And when I was growing up there, he had a band. It was called, crazy name, Johnny Cougar and the Zone. I think I've got that right. Johnny Cougar and the Zone. Saw him play all over Indianapolis and would open up for, bands that would come through town. And he just plugged along and kept doing his thing and wouldn't stop. And then Jack and Diane happened. It wasn't I Need a Lover that won't drive me crazy that when Pat Benatar did it. No. That kind of helped him a little bit, but no, Jack and Diane. And it was all over. But John Cougar, 63 years old today. And it's just funny. He just seems like somebody that, if you're from Indianapolis or if you're from Indiana, we just feel like he's one of our brothers because he just plugged along in the bars there forever and would not stop. Also today, drummer Tico Torres, Bon Jovi, 61 years old. And here's a biggie. Check this out. Frontman Tom York, 46 years old. Frontman for Radiohead. Who had one of the seminal songs of this century? Oh, yeah. Creep. Those guitars, those lyrics, that song. Forever, he's got that in his back pocket. Creep is amazing. Amazing. Radiohead, great band. Tom York, paid his price for being a rock star, didn't he? I think he still is. But Creep, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, those guitars. Oh, man. All right, here's some trivia. Here's some trivia for you right now. And the first person to post the correct answer, first person to post the correct answer will reach in the drunk drawer, whether you've won something before or not. On Twitter. You better follow us on Twitter right now, at JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet. If you can hear my voice and you know the answer to this, you better get over to Twitter. There is a 10-second delay between my voice and what you hear and what gets posted. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds. I'm going to ramble for 10 seconds. Get over to Twitter, at JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet, because this is a real trivia question. One that you will not have the time to look up the answer to. You either know it or you don't. And somebody is going to win and be there on Twitter first. And I am watching. Okay, here's the trivia question. Tico Torres is the drummer for John Bon Jovi, the band Bon Jovi. There are members of the band of Bon Jovi. Of course, there's John. And there is the aforementioned Tico. And we have Richie Sambora. And we have David Bryan on keys. Who is the bass player for John Bon Jovi? Mark, get set, go. I am watching. I am watching. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Hashtag DMRadioNet. Let's see who bangs this out. And there's only one correct answer. Only one that will work. I'm looking. Nope. Nope. Come on, keep it coming. Nope. Nope. Come on, keep it coming. Let's go. I'm watching them click by. Nope. 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 Of course you don't know. Nope. 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 Status unknown. Nice guess, but nope. Nope. Hugh McDonald is not the answer, MG. Nice try. Nope. Nope. No. Let's see. Abe Pagoda. Let's see. Nancy Hayfield Burns. I saw that. Almost would be the right answer because wait till you hear what the real answer is. Let's see. Had enough time to Google it. And, yep. See, you cannot Google this answer. I already told you. Can't do it. Can't do it. Did I stump everybody? I just watched 100 tweets go by. Nobody. Who is the bass player for Bon Jovi? Les Claypool. Okay, Ken. All right. Do you guys want the right answer? You want the answer? Nope. Robert Noel Jr.? Nope. Nope. Jack Thompson? Nope. It's not Alec John? Nope. Well, whoever it is, he isn't very well known. Chico, that's a good answer. Chico. Okay, all right. You ready? I want somebody to just say, okay, Jimmy, we give up. Status unknown wins. Status unknown wins. Status unknown comes in late with there is no bass player. Yes, that is the correct answer. There is no bass player for John Bon Jovi. Isn't that crazy? They chose to go that route. Yep. There is no bass player. Hugh McDonald is a studio cat. Good bass player, too. Good bass player. But they've never, after the departing of, what's his name? Boom. He was gone. They never brought, and watch a video of Bon Jovi. What a trick question. It's not a trick question. It's not. They don't have a bass player. Watch a video. There's no bass players. It's weird. Once in a while, you'll get a glimpse of somebody in the background. You'll see a headstock to a bass. But isn't that crazy? There's no bass player. It's kind of a trick question. But yeah, you would think. But there is no bass player for John Bon Jovi. So anyway, all right. So there you go. Status unknown. Awesome. You know what to do. Send Rita your address. Email Walanda. And we'll get you something from the gift drawer. Okay? All right. Very good answer. That was amazing. Somebody pulled that off. Okay. All right. take our break. Tonight, Graham Hancock for the duration. Email Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You can tweet in any questions that you have to hashtag F2BQ. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Shoot me an email, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Tonight, Graham Hancock. Tomorrow night, Scott Wolter, America Unearthed. Yep, and then I head out of town. I'll be back right after this. Do not touch that mouse. Be right back.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, you have tuned into the latest phenomenon in late night talk radio, Fade to Black, starring the inimitable Jimmy Church, showcasing his continuing quest in pursuit of knowledge of the strange and paranormal. Sit back, open your mind, and let's get cracking.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444, or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
There is no bass player. Hugh McDonald's good. He's a great guy. He just he's a salaried position. No health benefits. All right. Wasn't a trick question. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Excited, fired up. Graham Hancock will be joining us in just a few minutes. Let's get to some quick email. This from King B. The best interview, the question from yesterday. When they ask that question, I always say the next one. I just went to Marketing 101 with that one. That's it. That's the answer. I just had to read that. This from Brett Sherman. This was actually on Facebook. And he says concerning the show last night, what about the Sumerian cuneiform tablets that tell all about the Anunnaki and predate the Old Testament and the Dead Sea Scrolls by thousands of years? He goes on to say, your buddy, David Childress, has a good take on this. What about the giants with red hair that they found on the West Coast and the Grand Canyon area? These giants with red hair that were found in the early 1900s and have been kept hidden by the Smithsonian. It's amazing to me concerning the show last night with L.A. and Rick. Great show, by the way. The Smithsonian comes into play every single time. Go look at any of those old newspaper articles. Go dig it up. Go dig up Giants, Smithsonian, 1900s. Go read some of the articles. It's hilarious. Yep, we found the bones, we photographed them, and then the Smithsonian came in, and that's the last you hear of it. Over and over again. This is not some urban legend. It's just the way that it is. It is just the way that it is. Hey, did you see today on Carrie? I showed off Walter's Question Everything mug. And, I wanted to touch upon really quick. After the Sandy Hook conversation that just seemed to kept coming up last week. So I go and I watch, I don't know, every documentary I could, every article. Went to Caravan of Midnight, listened there. And it came up today on Carrie's show. Look, this ain't 9/11. This isn't MH17 or 370 or anything like that. Sandy Hook is a whole nother subject. And I listened with an open mind. Everything that anybody wanted to present on Sandy Hook. And I got to tell you, in the words of my cousin Vinny, the defense's case doesn't hold water. If one of the children at Sandy Hook shows up, DNA test, is alive, it's a different story. But all of the police recordings and all of the video and all of the evidence of the backdating of stuff on the internet and all of that, all of it can be explained. All of it. The panic of that day in the police recordings. Man, like I said today on Carrie's show, they should have been looking for 20 suspects. They should have been panning out. There were 7 suspects they were looking for. They only found 1. Where are the rest? But you know what? Anybody. They should have been looking for anybody. So anyway, the panic of that day, I'm just not buying into it right now. Am I saying that the government doesn't lie? That's not what I'm saying at all. We're deceived at every turn. Sandy Hook, I ain't buying into it. And I'm not going to be that guy that jumps on the Sandy Hook bandwagon and has one of those families show up and tell me that, their child died that day. How dare you? I don't want to be that guy. I'm not going to do it. I'm not. Anybody's got some evidence they want to present, send it to me. I will check it out. I will thoroughly look into it. But right now, that case is closed, in my opinion. All right, where are we? Ebola. Ugh. Whatever. Another mass media, just fear-mongering situation. North Korea, Kim Jong-un is still missing. Hasn't surfaced. You would think that with all of the media going on around about this right now, that he would pop up and say everything's cool. He hasn't. It ain't cool right now in North Korea. Don't know what's going on. I was watching those videos of him limping. Dude is, he was limping. The mass explosion I talked about yesterday in Iran. All the reports, today, it's nowhere. I couldn't believe it. I thought that there was going to be a bunch of stuff about it today. And there wasn't. I can't figure that one out. Good spin control in Iran. That's all I got to say. Somehow they got that just squashed today. But really good news was released today, courtesy of Renee. Thank you. I caught a whiff of this yesterday. It's confirmed. William Shatner has agreed to come back as Captain Kirk in Star Trek 3. How cool is that? I'm telling you what. Let's see. Brad says, thank you for the Sandy Hook stance. as April 214 stone was removed. Hey. Concerning that, oh, look at Michael Oming. Check that out. I'm going to tell Graham about this. He'll be with us here in a few minutes. That's cool. Can I retweet that, Michael? I'm going to retweet that. That's cool. Look at that. That's what I'm talking about. Ebola, whatever. Yeah. I don't know what to think about Ebola anymore. This whole campaign, and I'm telling you, watch the stocks of the big farm, and then that's where the truth is to Ebola. I'm serious. Georgia Guidestones. I saw the video today posted over at, where did I see? Oh, faders.org. Saw the video. And I don't know what took me over to faders.org. Something did. Maybe it was Twitter. I clicked. Went over and was watching everybody hang out there, the Fader Knots. You guys don't know, but I'm in the background. I'm watching. I'm there. And I watched the video of the deciphering of the 2014 cube. I've now seen about 4 or 5 different theories behind the cube. And so I watched this video, the one with the 3-10-14 decoding of the cube. Came up with that date, 3-10-14. And that the date, 500 million people, the population, and it was the day that Ebola was introduced to the U.S. No, I disagree with the video. Disagree with that. That's a month off. So, no, I disagree. And also with the decoding of it and the math, you can get anything out of it if you work at it with that pair of glasses on. Okay? But you can tie a few things to it. You could tie it to Kim Jong-un disappeared. Maybe that's what the cube is for. But how about this one? It was the day before the Dodgers lose 3-2 to the Cards. Bump. With the Georgia Guides on the 2014 cube, MM. I think we need to look at some Roman numerals. I think there are some other ways to look at that. And I started playing with it today, and I will give you my decoding of the Georgia Guidestone cube tomorrow. It might have something to do with the Dodgers. If you have a story, you have anything you want covered here on Fade to Black, email me, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. We can't catch everything, and if you've seen something interesting, something that nobody is talking about, paranormal, world events, craziness, email me, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Would love to cover what you think is important. This is bespoke radio for the masses. All right, we're ready to go. After the break, Graham Hancock. Tomorrow night, Scott Walter, America Unearthed. Yeah, it's like Lost History Week right here on Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Stay with us, everybody. I'll be right back with Graham Hancock.
Are you afraid of the dark? Don't move. Don't touch that mouse. You are listening to Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark matter.
Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
You know what that sound means. Yes, you do. Ha ha. All right, everybody, strap it in. Let's go. Let's get this one cracking. Ah, yes. Ah, yes. Graham Hancock is the author of major international bestsellers, The Sign and the Seal, Fingerprints of the Gods, and Heaven's Mirror. His books have sold over 5 million copies worldwide and have translated into 27 languages. His public lectures, radio and TV appearances, including 2 major TV series for Channel 4 in the UK and the Learning Channel in the US, Quest for the Lost Civilization and Flooded Kingdoms of the Ice Age, have put his ideas before audiences of tens of millions. He has become recognized as an unconventional thinker who raises controversial questions about humanity's past. Yes, that's him in the background. In 2005, Graham published Supernatural, Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind, an investigation of shamanism and the origins of religion. This controversial book suggests that experiences in altered states of consciousness have played a fundamental role in the evolution of human culture and that other realities, indeed parallel worlds, surround us all the time, but are not normally accessible to our senses. While researching Supernatural, Hancock traveled to the Amazon to drink the visionary brew ayahuasca, the vine of souls. Used by shamans for more than 4,000 years, it was his experiences with the vine that led to his latest work, Entangled. Written with the same page-turning appeal that has made his nonfiction so popular, Entangled is his first novel. It tells the story of a supernatural battle of good against evil fought out across the dimension of time on the human plane. I'd like to welcome back to the program Mr. Graham Hancock. Graham, good evening, sir. How are you?
Hi, good evening. I am just fine. And I have to add to that intro that Entangled is not my first work of fiction. The intro is just a wee bit out of date. Entangled was published in 2010. But since then, I have written 2 more novels, the War God series about the Spanish conquest of Mexico.
Which I knew, and I know, and we've already talked about it, and my apologies, Graham.
That's all right. That's all right. Not a problem.
So
it's okay to go back in time sometime.
Yes, it is, isn't it, though?
Entangled is still a very important book to me. It was my baptism of fire into the realm of fiction and writing supernatural adventure mystery stories. I'm best known for my nonfiction, but I have this parallel track as a novelist, and it's something that I feel a strong calling to explore, both as a writer and also because fiction offers the possibility to get into some really extraordinary ideas without having to give footnotes, you know.
Which do you enjoy more? I can imagine both probably are like equal for their own reasons, but which do you enjoy more?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Both of them are absolutely absorbing, but for different reasons. With the fiction, I am immersing myself in a parallel world, which is, you know, inhabited by my characters, and the dilemmas and the difficulties and the dangers and the personality challenges that they face. So it becomes deeply absorbing. I have to fully imagine that reality and immerse myself in it. It's the closest thing to playing a really powerful virtual reality game that I can imagine. And when I'm writing fiction, I just lose all track of time. I just get lost in imagining and recreating that world, which recently has been the extraordinarily bloody and dangerous world of the Spanish conquest of Mexico. When I'm writing nonfiction, it's like being engaged in a very long-running intellectual debate and argument, where my job is to argue my case, to advocate a particular point of view, to provide the evidence in support of that point of view, to be aware of the criticisms that may come from the academic establishment and to attempt to forestall those criticisms. Right. I often feel that writing my kind of nonfiction is a bit like being a lawyer, or an advocate representing a client who may be poorly understood and not appreciated by the jury at all. And I have to get that client's point of view across. And in the case of my nonfiction, that client is the possible lost civilization of remote prehistory, which academics refuse to believe could even have existed, but which I'm convinced did exist and which I seek to represent.
Couldn't you just say that fiction is fun?
Yeah, fiction is fun.
It's fun.
Fiction is fun. When I look at my kids when they were younger, getting deeply involved in computer games, they're loving every minute of it. That's me when I'm sitting writing fiction. I am having great fun.
Absolutely.
I'm just having a ball. It's really as I say, I lose all track of time. It's just thoroughly enjoyable. And it's because all the imaginative faculties are alert and awake, and you're plunged into the well of story. We're all about stories, we human beings, narrative. It's all about that, and it's just great to plunge into that and have the opportunity to do so.
In fiction, is there a zone? Is there an area that is there a boundary you won't go into, or is it just the trying to explore it all the way out to the edge of the universe as far as you can take it?
As far as I can take it. I'll go wherever the story takes me. And that's the other great thing about writing fiction is I don't always know where the story is going to take me.
Right.
Things will happen to my story as I'm writing it during the day that I did not anticipate, did not expect. I don't actually ever make a plan when I'm writing fiction. I just begin with a moment and see where it takes me. So wherever it takes me, and it can take me to some pretty surprising places. And particularly since the underlying theme of all my fiction, whether it's Entangled or whether it's the War God series, is the battle of good against evil, I find as a writer that I have to confront evil. I have to confront human wickedness in what I'm writing about. And that can be a pretty tough call. Sometimes there's scenes I've written that have horrified me. I've had to do that. I've had to go there and imagine those scenes and write about them because down the ages, human beings have done terrible things. And I suppose the possibility I'm exploring is that there are supernatural forces, for non-physical forces beyond this realm that are kind of playing a game with us, seeking to lead us onto dark and terrible tracks. And actually, if you consider the number of wars that have been fought down the ages in the name of this or that god, if you consider the number of people who've been tortured and burnt at the stake and whose lives have been destroyed, in the name of some supernatural entity, it's easy to imagine that we are the playthings of demons.
It's so, War Gods is so cinematic. Would you ever consider a movie option for that, or have you been approached about it?
I haven't been approached about it. I hope it will happen. I think it would make good cinema. It's an odd thing, I mean, the story of the Spanish conquest of Mexico has never really been told in novel format in the English language. We do have there is a great series of books by Gary Jennings called Aztec and its sequels, which do deal with the Aztec way of life, and they are fantastic novels, but they really deal with the period before the Spanish conquest of Mexico. What I'm dealing with in my novels is the just almost unbelievable events that took place between 1519 and 1521 when Hernan Cortés, a great adventurer and a Machiavellian player, turned up on the coast of the Yucatan with 490 men in 11 ships to take on the might of the Aztec Empire. He didn't even know really what he was getting into then, but what he was getting into was a standing army of 200,000 men who, if they captured you, would cut your heart out, and who had been involved in wars for 200 years. But Cortés managed to defeat this gigantic gigantic force. And how he managed to do so and what was involved in this conquest is a fascinating study to explore. And it changed the world that we live in. It's not really understood how dramatic an event the Spanish conquest of Mexico was. It was the last great epic adventure of the ancient world. It's on a par with Alexander the Great or the achievements of Julius Caesar, and it involved men of iron will, and of course there are women in the story too. I mean, Malinal, Cortez's lover, I portray her as a Maya princess who spoke also the Nahuatl language, the language of the Aztecs. And Cortez did admit on one of the few occasions when he spoke glowingly of her, he did admit that had it not been for Malinal, he would never have achieved his conquest of Mexico. She gave him insights into the psychology of Moctezuma. She gave him an understanding of how he could defeat this gigantic, ferocious army, how he could play on their superstitions, how he could manipulate Moctezuma's mind. And one of the things that intrigued me about her as a character was what motivated her to use Cortez as her instrument to bring Moctezuma down. And I have another female character who's a young witch called Tosi. Again, this is based on historical fact. The Aztecs had witches, just like the Spanish. And just like the Spanish, they murdered, they sacrificed their witches. In the case of the Spanish, they burned them at the stake. In the case of the Aztecs, they marched them up the pyramid and cut their hearts out. And we meet these two young women in the fattening pen. Again, historical fact, the Aztecs fattened their victims before they sacrificed them. Imagine that predicament, being stuck in a prison under guard and being fed a high-calorie diet so that you'll be plump and delicious for the god when you're marched up the pyramid and your heart is cut out. Altogether, it's just an extraordinary series of events to imagine, to write about. The first encounters on the battlefield between the Spanish and initially the Maya and then the Aztecs are also astonishing. You're looking at huge inequality of odds, 490 Spaniards against armies of 40,000, 50,000, in one case 100,000, but the Spanish have cavalry. They only 16 cavalry, but my goodness, those horses made just a huge difference in this conflict. You have to imagine the 16 heavy horse charging across the battlefield at 30 miles an hour, their hooves just plowing up the earth, and the men upon them are armored in steel. And the Aztecs are looking at this and they can't understand what they're seeing. They've never seen anything like this in their lives before. They think they're dealing with gods, with some kind of hybrid being who are part deer and part human. They have no tactics for dealing with a cavalry charge. European armies did. They had pikes, they had whole systems. European infantry had whole systems for dealing with cavalry charges. The Aztecs didn't. And then the Spanish have these dogs of war. This is something else I portray in great detail in the novel, that the dogs are used as a weapon of war. The Aztecs knew about dogs. They had dogs, as a matter of fact. They had chihuahuas.
Chihuahuas, yeah.
Chihuahuas. And their chihuahuas didn't even bark, So when they're confronted by these huge mastiffs and wolfhounds, which are also armored and which have been trained to relish human flesh, this wreaks havoc with their battle line. And then finally the guns, the fact that the Spanish have a primitive form of musket called an arquebus. They have cannon. All of this gave them astonishing tactical advantages on the battlefield, but the biggest advantage of all came from the fact that the Spanish arrived on the coast of Mexico in the year 1519, which in the Aztec system was the year 1 Reed, and that was the year in which the god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, it had been prophesied that Quetzalcoatl would return and that he would have the appearance that the Spanish had, that he would be white-skinned, that he would be bearded, that he would be armed with strange weapons, that he would arrive in ships that moved by themselves without paddles, and that he would overthrow a wicked king. And it was this prophecy that Malinal taught Cortez to exploit to bring Moctezuma down. Quetzalcoatl was supposedly a god of peace. Cortez was the ultimate god of war, but he was able to exploit that prophecy to his advantage.
Was it all just based on gold? I mean, ultimately, that was it. There was no
golden god.
Yeah, golden god, and it wasn't about land. They didn't go, it wasn't. It was just about plunder.
Well, no, it rapidly did become about land. I think from the very beginning, Cortez had ambitions that he would become a kind of king of Mexico.
Correct.
This was where he was going. I mean, the Spanish king in the later years took exception to this, and Cortez was pulled down and never allowed to achieve that ambition. But I think always at the back of the mind was the notion that he would establish his own kingdom in this far off land, and so land was important, but the first and primary motive was gold. And there's that famous saying of Cortez that we Spaniards suffer from an ailment of the heart for which the only remedy is gold.
Right.
And they greedily sought out gold. Now, the Maya didn't have much gold, and after Cortez had thrashed the Maya at the Battle of Potonchan, which I describe in the first volume of War God, he very quickly learned about the Aztecs and the fact that they did have gold and that they did hugely value gold. And that's when he started to head like a guided missile for Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, 200 miles inland through the mountains. And he had to fight his way there every inch of the way. And often he came very close to facing defeat, but he managed to motivate his men in a most unusual manner. He simply destroyed their entire fleet of 11 ships so that they could not sail back to Cuba. They had to conquer or die.
Yeah,
and then, the other aspect of it was this religious fanaticism that the Spanish had. They had been already fighting for 700 years against the Moors, the Islamic occupation of Spain, and they had driven the Muslims out of Spain just shortly before the conquest of Mexico began, and they were driven by a kind of religious fury. Cortez really did believe that he was acting in the name of God, and this is one of the things that I play on in the novel, because Moctezuma, the Aztec leader, used to eat psilocybin mushrooms. Yeah, I'm actually known as quite a big fan of psychedelics, and I believe they can be wonderful. But if they're used with wicked intent, they can also have very negative consequences. And Moctezuma would eat psilocybin mushrooms, and then he would encounter this entity in his trances. This is a historical fact. The entity that he believed was Huitzilopochtli, the god called Hummingbird, their war god, who drove him on, constantly misadvised him, led him on to incredible acts of folly in the wars against the Spaniards. And at the same time, Cortez is having dreams of St. Peter, and St. Peter is driving him on to ever greater acts of cruelty and wickedness. And so the notion that I'm playing with, and one can do this in a novel and you can't do it in nonfiction, is that the same demon who appears to Moctezuma as the war god Hummingbird takes on another disguise and appears to Cortez as Saint Peter, and plays these two men like puppets to maximize human misery in the Americas. And of course, this was the beginning of the whole genocide of Native American peoples, and it was the beginning of the whole epoch of the West exerting its dominant power over many countries around the world, including the Far East, Africa, and the Americas.
What do you think was the reason for Spain not remaining with such power? I mean, there must have been tons of gold, shiploads full of gold that went back to Spain.
There was,
yeah. Where is all of that? I just imagine huge vaults of gold, and Spain remaining as a power. And you look at Spain today, and it's not the case.
Yes, it fell.
Yeah.
It fell. There were two factors to that. I think they became bloated and and overconfident, and they didn't stay lean. And I think the other factor, of course, was Britain. Britain rose to preeminence in this period and took on the might of Spain and destroyed Spain. The British began to emerge as a naval power. in this period, and within 100 years were the dominant force on the oceans, which they then remained for several hundred years longer. Spain had its day. It had burnt itself out. Mexico, the conquest of Mexico and Peru were, of course, entirely the work of Spain, but much of the rest of the world in due course was taken on by good old Britain, where it then set about causing havoc and chaos and misery, as every colonial power does.
Yeah, when I suppose when their navy was sunk, and it was thousands of ships, and they'd never quite recovered from that. But I'm just imagining this huge wealth, and where did all of that go? I mean, they plundered
Well, all the courts of Europe were, of course, terminally in debt, and that was what they sought to solve by dragging back all this gold from the New World. It's a bit of a mystery, really. I mean, where did it all go? Where does all the gold go, actually? And why are we all so crazy about gold? I mean, what's so exciting about gold? The Maya called it the shit of the sun, actually.
Is that right?
What is? Yeah, that's right. What is so special about gold? Why do we love this glowing metal? We can't eat it. I suppose we can wear it in the form of jewelry.
Are you wearing? Do you have gold on right now?
I don't have any gold on. I've never worn gold. I haven't got the slightest interest in gold. It's absolutely meaningless to me, and that's perhaps why I understand that people are motivated by it, but I don't feel that burning passion myself. I don't see what it's for. It's a bit of a mysterious thing, really. Of course, there might be all kinds of explanations for that, but it has undoubtedly down the ages motivated human beings to do terrible things.
Well, when you think about it, somebody figured out the importance of gold, or some intrinsic value to gold, an awful long time ago.
Well, yes, certainly it goes back a very long time. I mean, it has. Let's be honest here. It has no intrinsic value. There is no value to gold. It isn't something that it's something that we bestow value upon.
Right. That's what I was.
Rather, as I would say, we bestow value upon the American dollar, the American dollar is just a piece of paper,
Right.
But it has value because we choose to believe that it has value. If that belief ever gets withdrawn from it, then it collapses.
Yeah, I suppose when I said intrinsic, I was referring to more of like an invisible value. I mean, there isn't. Somebody put a value on it that didn't exist a long time ago, and it's been held at that level ever since. Now we have technical reasons for gold's value, circuitry and its conductance, and I get all of that. But they didn't have that, 10,000 years ago.
Well, supposedly not, and actually, that's not a big part of the value of gold today. It is a useful substance in a technological society, but its value comes from our belief that it's valuable.
Right.
And human beliefs are of course subject to manipulation all the time. And right now we have bitcoins. Why are bitcoins valuable? What's valuable about that? It's all because we choose to believe it's valuable, and if we change that belief, then it stops being so. I mean, everybody's saying, okay, if our currencies collapse, we'll have to take refuge in gold, but why not take refuge in coca beans?
Right.
Matter of fact, that's what the Aztecs used as a currency.
If we go to anarchy and there's war in the streets, whatever, some just absolute almost at the brink of the end of civilization, I think the last thing I'm going to want to trade water for is gold.
Yeah, give me water. Give me water and shelter any time.
And some coca beans. Coca beans will hold some value.
Yeah.
Do you have any bitcoins? Do you have any?
I don't have any bitcoins. I don't. I just don't. I suppose perhaps I ought to get a bitcoin. Or these days you get like a tiny fragment of a bitcoin, don't you?
You can.
Little bits. And one of my sons is into this, and he's got a computer working in the background mining bitcoins. I mean, I can't even begin to understand how you mine bitcoins.
It's genius. It's genius. The whole idea behind Bitcoin to make something valuable, and it's just ones and zeros.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, might as well be ones and zeros as bits of metal, that you can't eat. I mean, it just shows our endless capacity for self-delusion. The things that really matter in the world, love, nurture, decency, kindness, how can you put a value on those, How can you put a value on living a good life? That's one of the problems of our society, that we seek to monetarize everything, to express everything in some kind or other of financial terms. And we forget that all these things, they're just symbols. And what lies at heart of it is the mystery and the dilemma of being a human being and living this life, and what are we here to do, and what is our purpose. If we focus entirely on finance, we may miss what it's really all about.
We need to clone you before it's too late. We need to clone it. We need more of you, Graham. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We're talking to Graham Hancock, live from the East Coast before he heads back to the UK. I read your little diatribe on Twitter today concerning Mr. Hawkins. And can you tell the audience about that a little bit?
Concerning Mr. Dawkins. Actually.
Dawkins. Did I say Hawkins? Same guy.
Did. Yeah,
same guy.
Same guy, yeah, basically. We're talking about Richard Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins
was formerly the professor of the public understanding of science at Oxford University in Britain. Now, can you imagine a more Orwellian title than that?
No.
The public apparently are not supposed to be able to understand science, so they need a man like Richard Dawkins to help them to understand it. He actually had a job as the professor for the public understanding of science. He's better known as a geneticist. He was famous for the book The Selfish Gene, which basically proposes the idea that even down at our most basic genetic level, we are selfish creatures engaged in selfish pursuits to maximize our own gain and to perpetuate our genes down the years. More recently, he wrote a book called The God Delusion.
Yep.
The basis of Richard Dawkins' philosophy is that everything can be reduced to matter, to material things. And therefore, Richard Dawkins, amongst many other scientists, believes that consciousness is a kind of illusion, that consciousness is what they call an epiphenomenon of brain activity. See, the idea is we've got these rather little fragile bodies, and what enabled us to survive in the war of all against all, in the law of the jungle, in the survival of the fittest, was that we evolved these big brains. We had these fragile little bodies, and we had to evolve big brains to be more efficient competitors and predators than, the saber-toothed tigers and the short-faced bears and so on that our ancestors confronted. And so in this process of physical evolution, we evolved these big, clever brains. And almost as an accidental byproduct of that, we get this thing called consciousness, which every one of us know we have. We know we're conscious, but we don't really understand what consciousness is. Well, Dawkins claims to understand what consciousness is. It's simply the illusion that results accidentally from having a big brain. Your consciousness is nothing more than your brain activity. You can reduce it to that. And that's why for a man like Dawkins or Daniel Dennett, or for that matter, the amazing Randy, who all approach science from the view that everything can be reduced to its material basis, they can't possibly believe in life after death. If your consciousness is simply a product of the activity of your brain, then it seems to follow logically for them that when your brain stops having any activity, when you flatline on the ECG, when you are physically dead, that your consciousness stops, and that's the end of your story, and you're just meat. And what I drew attention to in my Facebook post today is a very substantial study centered on the University of Southampton in Britain, where they have been talking to patients in emergency rooms, and they've been observing what happened to those patients. Many times in an emergency room, a patient will actually die. and be resuscitated. And sometimes they can be dead for several minutes. And they're absolutely flatline on the ECG. And by every physical measure, their brains are dead. And what this study has proved, we've known about these experiences for a long time, but this study has really nailed down the science. What happens is that these patients who die in the emergency room and then are recovered, actually that some aspect of them remains conscious. They're able to provide detailed descriptions of what happened to them in the emergency room. Their bodies are dead, their brains are dead, but their consciousness is still there. And this is a really problematic issue for materialist scientists to explain. I mean, I've no doubt they will writhe and spin it in all sorts of ways.
Right, and I want to make the point. It's not technically dead. They were dead.
They were dead.
This
is dead.
Yes.
These are dead people who are lying there. And,
yes.
And by the application of modern medical techniques, it's possible to revive them and bring them back to life. But they are dead.
Dead.
And
yes.
They are dead. And yet they are continuing to have experiences. And this, to me, is a revolution in our understanding of the nature of reality. And it suggests a possibility that I've been looking into for a long time and attempting to discuss with scientists and speak to others about, which is that our brains may not generate our consciousness. Our brains may be more like a transceiver or a receiver of consciousness. So it's not that the brain is a power plant that makes consciousness the way a generator makes electricity. It's more like the brain is a TV set which receives a signal and transmutes it into a picture. And yes, when you destroy the power plant, electricity stops being made. But when you destroy the TV set, the signal is still there. And this is, all of the measurements that you would do with that broken TV set would say the TV set is broken. But what actually causes pictures to come into appearance is the signal, and the signal is still present. And it's beginning to look as though consciousness might be like that. And that therefore, many of the ancient traditions that say that we are souls, we are spirits who incarnate in these physical bodies, to have experiences that perhaps it's only possible to have in physical realms, it begins to look like those ancient ideas are not primitive superstitions, but are in fact true. And I'm quite sure that they're true, and that as we investigate this matter more and more deeply, we're going to learn in more and more detail how true they are, that it's a very mysterious thing to be alive. It's a very mysterious thing to be born in a human body, and that it doesn't stop when we die. It doesn't stop. It goes on, but perhaps we have to account for what we've done in this life. You know, materialist scientists say to people like me, "Oh, you guys, you just believe in life after death because you find it comforting."
Right.
And, you know, my point is, no, I'm sorry, it's not comforting at all, because it means that whatever you do with your life has consequences that go on far beyond this 70 or 80 or however many years of physical life we get. It has consequences that may go on into eternity. And therefore, you have to be very careful about what you do with your life and how you lead it.
Dawkins is in for a big surprise.
Oh, I think so. It always amazes me when he states adamantly, and he has done so many times, when he states adamantly that there is no life after death. That, of course, coming from a genetics professor, appears, one would tend to take it at face value. But if you really probe that statement and think about it, how does he know that? How does he actually know that? What experiments has he done? What science has he done which proves that there is no life after death? And how can he simply discount the huge amount of evidence of people who have died and had experiences, which has now been put into a scientific framework by the study at the University of Southampton?
He's going to have a lot of explaining to do on the other side.
I think it's just going to be a very shocking experience.
He's got a lot of followers. He's got a huge, I mean, it's crazy, this this Dawkins Corporation that he has built, for lack of a better term. But you know what I'm referring to.
I know what you're referring to. It's a huge industry. He's one of the big gurus of the modern world.
Certainly.
And what his gurudom is doing is it's a very clever, focused attempt to persuade people that there is absolutely no meaning or purpose to life whatsoever.
Right. And what's scary for me when it comes to Dawkins, I don't mean to dwell on this, but you're the perfect guy for me to get this off my chest. with Dawkins, it's the glassy-eyed look at his audience as they're listening to him say nothing.
Yeah.
He doesn't really say. I know he's a bright guy and he's intimidating. I would have him in the studio and we would go toe to toe. I'm a doofus, but he doesn't say anything. Like you're saying, there's nothing backed up with science or fact or anything. He just merely states very simple and obvious things that don't have substance to it, but yet millions of people hang on his every syllable. It blows my mind.
I tell you what I think it is. I think that we are very disillusioned, and rightly so, with the mainstream religions in the modern world. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam in particular have imposed themselves for centuries, for thousands of years, really, as our relationship with the supernatural. It's all to be done through them, the priest, the rabbi, the mullah. They are the jealous intermediaries who claim to dominate and channel our relations with the supernatural realm. And I think we've all become, not all of us, but growing numbers of people, intelligent people, thinking people, are very disillusioned by the truth about these religions. And the truth about these religions is that they are big hierarchies, they are power structures, they're divisive, they seek to divide us one from another, rather than that, they all talk the talk of peace and love. But actually, all the big religions walk the walk of hatred and fear and suspicion. They make the outrageous case that they have a monopoly on the truth and that everybody else is wrong. And in the case of the more fanatical branches of these religions, particularly Islam these days, they will actually kill you if you don't agree with them. Mm-hmm. And I think that, I mean, imagine that one's hold on one's beliefs and ideas is so fragile that if somebody challenges you, you actually kill them. Mm-hmm. And you do so in the name of your God. Mm-hmm. Rightly and properly, people are sick of this. Mm-hmm. And they're sick of the narrow-minded stupidity and arrogance that is associated with these big religions. And there's a tendency to just say, we want rid of all that. It has harnessed the human race for so long with so much misery and oppression. It was only 300 years ago, less actually, that the Christian church stopped burning people at the stake. And Islam to this day is still stoning women to death. You know what? Because they're not faithful to their husbands. What a ridiculous idea. What a completely mad idea. You have a death cult like, this Islamic State. It's just a death cult in the name of God. It's right that we should reject that. But I think the problem is that in rejecting the ridiculous pronouncements of the mainstream religions, we are also throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because they falsely claimed to have a monopoly on the truth. And there is a spiritual side to man. And I use the term man generically. Of course, I mean men and women. There is a spiritual side to humanity, which we desperately do need to nurture, but we need to find new ways to nurture it. So in throwing out religion, we should not also throw out spirituality. Because then we're falling into the hands of the religion of what my friend John Anthony West calls the Church of Progress, mm-hmm. which is the religion that Richard Dawkins happens to lead, mm-hmm. Which claims that there is no spiritual side to man, and we're just these, to humanity, and that we're just these meat robots, who go through life with the illusion of free will, whereas in fact everything is predetermined by our genes and by our bodies. And to me, that's just as repulsive and just as superstitious an idea as the idea of any of the mainstream religions. And that's I think there is a need to remember this, that it is at least possible that we are fundamentally spiritual creatures having a material experience, rather than simply material creatures. And the shamans in the Amazon, who I have spent a great deal of time with, drinking the fascinating visionary brew called ayahuasca, have told me, when I've asked them, what do you think's wrong with Western technological society? What do you think's wrong? Why are we going so wrong? Why are ours the society that have created atom bombs that are causing all this pollution around the world, that aren't even able to feed the hungry when people are dying of starvation all over the world? They say it's very simple. You guys have severed your connection with spirit. If you don't reconnect to spirit, you're going to bring the whole house of cards down on your heads and on ours. And this is our dilemma. We need to reconnect to spirit, and the way we're going to do it is not through the big religions.
In a way, not to go back to Dawkins, but in a way, they're talking about Dawkins and that mindset. Could you take Richard down to the Amazon and introduce him to a shaman and change his mind?
Well, if anybody cares to go to my YouTube channel and check it out, they'll find actually I ambushed Richard Dawkins at an event that he was speaking at, and I turned on the recorder. Now, he was speaking about a book that he wrote called The Magic of Reality, which claims that, of course, that reality is entirely material in basis, and that this reality that confronts us, that we can weigh and measure and count, this physical reality, is the only reality there is. So I stood up in this after this talk that he'd given, and I recorded his answer, and I asked him whether he would be willing to challenge his view of reality. I pointed out to him that there are many shamanistic cultures, tribal hunter-gatherer cultures around the world, who believe that this is only one reality, and that we are surrounded by many other realities, and that in order to gain access to those realities, we have to enter a trance state. We have to alter our consciousness. This is what shamanism is all about. It's about techniques to alter consciousness, of which the most widely used are the visionary plants. Those plants that go into the ayahuasca brew, or the peyote cactus, or the San Pedro or iboga in Africa, for example, that fundamentally alter consciousness and then allow us to gain access to these, what the shamans see as other levels of reality. They call them spirit worlds, but quantum physicists might call them parallel universes. This is, to me, it's a very valid line of inquiry, and it's something that we should look into. So I suggested to Dawkins, why don't you go down to the Amazon and drink ayahuasca? I'll make it possible for you as a scientific experiment. If you're a good scientist, surely you should at least be prepared to have this experience. Now, Dawkins is, in fact, a very clever arguer and a very clever political operator, and he knew that he'd been put on the spot because he couldn't, honestly, as a scientist, he couldn't maintain his scientific credibility and say, oh, no, I'd never do that. He had to say, and he did say, that if he could be assured that it was medically safe, and if there were a doctor present, he would consider taking a powerful psychedelic, perhaps even ayahuasca. And in fact, that was more than 2 years ago, and it's never happened since then. And quite a number of people who are working, for example, in psilocybin research, scientists themselves, took note of what Dawkins had said and approached him with an offer that they would facilitate psilocybin journeys for him in a laboratory setting with a doctor present. But up to this day, he has never taken them up on that. And colleagues of mine who work with ayahuasca likewise approached him about ayahuasca and said, come on down to the Amazon and we'll give you the brew. But again, he's avoided those approaches thus far. Actually, if I were to seek to turn Richard Dawkins on with anything, it would be with smoked DMT. DMT is the active ingredient of ayahuasca. It is arguably the most powerful hallucinogen known to man. Once you've smoked 4 tokes on a pipe of DMT, you are on a rocket ship to the other side of reality, whether you like it or not. There's no negotiation with it. It doesn't matter how you exert your will. You are gone into a seamlessly convincing parallel world inhabited, as many who've smoked DMT, and I myself have smoked DMT a dozen times, inhabited by what appear to be intelligent entities. Now, they may or may not be intelligent entities. It's possible that they're just a projection of our own minds, but there seems to be a separate freestanding reality there, and DMT offers a way to investigate and explore that reality in a targeted way. And this was precisely what Rick Strassman at the University of New Mexico did with human volunteers in the 1990s, with astonishing results. It was as though they were all traveling to the same far-off land that nobody had visited before, and that they were meeting the same beings and intelligences there who were saying the same things to them. These guys weren't even comparing notes. And Rick Strassman had to admit the possibility that perhaps these are just in our minds, but equally possible is that these are separate freestanding realities, parallel universes, in other words. We don't need the Large Hadron Collider to explore parallel universes. We've already got the kit inside our heads, our brains, and what we need to do is to alter the receiver wavelength of the brain, to do so with a very effective instrument like DMT. And we may be in contact with other levels of reality. And intriguingly, a number of Rick Strassman's volunteers came back with reports that they'd encountered entities, which, by the way, often looked like the kind of classic image of the ET, that they'd encountered entities who said to them, "We're so glad you've discovered this technology. Now we can communicate with you more easily." We're focused, again, it's a character of our society, we're focused entirely on the material side of things. We're looking to build spaceships that we can cross interstellar space with, and we're expecting the visitors to come to us in spaceships that can cross interstellar space. It's all about very high tech. They're a bit like us, but they're much more technologically advanced. And what we're not considering is that in the mysterious realms of consciousness, we may be much more readily able to access those other entities, those other intelligences, and far easier than building a high-tech spaceship that can cross interstellar space is simply to change the receiver wavelength of the brain with DMT and to enter a parallel realm and gain knowledge and information from the entities that inhabit it. And this, to me, is a promising area for future scientific research.
Where does an idea come from?
Well, I mean, that's the $64 million question, isn't it? Where does it come from? Because ideas, often when we have our best ideas, they just spark up in our minds. It's not like we were engaged in with furrowed brows in some deep thought process, which finally led us to the revelation. No, very often what happens, many scientists will report this, artists report this, musicians report this. It's inspiration that something suddenly comes to us. We suddenly get it. And where does that come from? How do we explain that if the brain is simply manufacturing our consciousness? But the notion that our consciousness is non-local to the brain, that it's manifesting through the brain, that it's part of and connected to a much wider invisible reality, raises the possibility that those ideas might come from that wider realm, might even come from past lives. Again, this is something that the hardline materialist faction will miss because they don't believe that there's such a thing as life after death. How could we have had past lives? But in a sense, what a waste of this magnificent physical universe if all of us who get to live here only get to live here once. How much more interesting it would be to have multiple incarnations, as many ancient traditions maintain, to have many different challenging experiences, to be born. It's like a pack of cards thrown at random into life, and one life you might be born, a monarch, and another life you might be born a pauper. But there are lessons to learn in both those lives. Maybe past lives provide us with motives and inspirations that we're not fully aware of. That, the ancient Greeks, when they talked about reincarnation, said that part of the deal with reincarnation is that you have to drink the waters of forgetfulness. That the part of the deal is that you forget your past life. Because if you remembered all your past lives, if you could bring them fully to consciousness, then the game that you're plunged into would no longer be played fairly. You would know the rules. It's only because you don't know the rules that the life you lead can actually teach you things. But maybe when we drink the waters of forgetfulness, sometimes we don't forget everything. Haunting memories come back to remind us. And in this context, again, there's intriguing scientific research, the work of Ian Stevens at the University of Virginia. Now, Ian Stevens passed away a few years ago, but his work has been taken on by a number of his other colleagues. And they are, with incredible, spooky detail, documenting memories of past lives. Ian Stevens did most of his work in India. And of course, in India, they believe in reincarnation. So when children start speaking of a past life, the parents don't discourage them. In America and Britain, when children start speaking of a past life, the parents often do discourage them. But the new work being done at the University of Virginia is primarily with American subjects. And there's an amazing number of children who do remember in detail, in ways that can be proved, past lives. And again, if we're just a product of our brains and our bodies, and there's nothing more to us than that, then how can we have had past lives? This implies that consciousness must go on from life to life. It must continue. And I just think we need to be much more open to these ideas, and that if we were more open to them, we'd have a better chance of understanding this mysterious thing called reality.
Are you familiar with the case of James Leininger?
Yes, I am.
A fascinating case.
It's an absolutely fascinating case. He's the pilot, right?
Yeah, the kid. Yeah,
he's a kid who had a past life at the Battle of Iwo Jima. He was flying a Corsair, and he was shot down from the Battle of Iwo Jima. And this child is brought into the world. His parents take him to an aeronautics museum, and he recognizes the aircraft, and it sparks up all these memories. And he starts talking about, and he names the aircraft carrier which he took off from
at the age of like 3.
At the age of like 3.
Yes.
And the details, it just sends chills down your spine. The details are so compelling. And, this is not some urban legend or some popular tale. This has been thoroughly researched at the University of Virginia. And when you look at the evidence, it's absolutely compelling. Now, intriguingly, children who remember past lives often died a violent or sudden death in their previous life. This is one of the intriguing mysteries. And the question we have to ask ourselves here, is there something about a violent or sudden death in a life that causes you to remember that life in your next life? In other words, that interferes with what the Greeks called the waters of forgetfulness.
Right.
Maybe that's why. Maybe it's not that is. Maybe you don't have to die a violent death in order to have a next life. But maybe if you die a violent death, you're more likely to remember your previous life, because it's not all by any means, but a substantial proportion of children who remember past lives do report a violent death in that previous life. And very many of them will have birthmarks. The birthmark may be an entry and an exit wound to the head or to the throat, for example, where the exit wound is much larger than the entry wound. This will be in the form of a small birthmark in the front of the head and the large birthmark at the back of the head. And that child remembers being shot in a past life. It's very curious the way these patterns manifest in the physical form of the next life. And I think it's high time, that our arrogant scientists who claim that there's nothing more to reality than that which we can weigh and measure and count, set that arrogance aside and started to grapple with information like this. And really, there isn't enough resources being put into researching extraordinary possibilities. We're too focused on a narrow mainstream. We're a very wealthy society. We should make possible the research into possibilities that could challenge our whole notion of reality. Even if not all of that research checks out, it's worth doing. And reincarnation research is one of those areas that is crying out for further funding and for detailed investigation.
Why do you think it gets shut down? When we look at, you would think that we have learned from our past mistakes, and I'm referring to the Vatican or Galileo or any other somebody that thought outside of the box in years past, where they were condemned, and then everything turned out to be correct.
They were right.
Yeah, they were right.
We burnt the poor guy at the stake, but hey, guess what? He was actually right.
Yeah, he was actually. We put him in prison for 30
Bruno,
years.
Burnt at the stake in February 1601 in the Piazza del Fiore in Rome. Why? Because he said, those glittering objects up in the sky far away that we call stars, they're actually suns, just like our sun. And they have planets that go around them. For that, the Inquisition burnt Giordano Bruno at the stake. They've apologized now, a bit late, because he was right all along. And Giordano Bruno felt that he would put his immortal soul in destiny if he were to lie. If he were to deny what he knew to be true. He chose, with incredible courage and fortitude, to die an agonizing death rather than to perjure himself and to state something he did not believe. He believed absolutely that those were suns and that planets revolved around them. And of course, that was the other problem, because at that time, the Church and the Inquisition were adamant that the Earth was the center of the universe.
That's right.
And that everything revolved around it. And how more wrong could they be than that? They were wrong. The ones who were doing the burning at the stake were wrong. And we see the same process in science today. Well, you don't get burnt at the stake today, but you do get your reputation and your good name assassinated by fellow scientists and by their friends in the media. If you propose an idea that doesn't fit in with the mainstream. And yes, absolutely. Why don't we learn from our mistakes? Why don't we look back at the history of scientific revolutions and realize that almost every idea that has really carried the human species forward has at one time or another been a heretical idea? I think there's that famous quote from Einstein, if I may paraphrase, if at first the idea is not absurd, then there is no hope for it.
Why? It's mind-blowing to me why a guy like Dawkins, going back to him, or his like, I should say, where they're steadfast.
They're a whole cult, the cult of the Church of Progress.
Right. It's so steadfast when they look back at their own brethren, everything that led them to where they were thinkers that thought outside of the box and who were persecuted.
Absolutely.
And were shot down. And now here we are today, where we've got guys that are considered fringe or crazy, like yourself, shows like this, where this is where we are progressing to. And you can't shoot this down. We need to investigate and understand everything in our universe.
Exactly. You can't shoot it down. And this is what's great, I think, about the world that we live in today. There are many problems, many traumas, many difficulties, but we are waking up as a species. This long period of sleepwalking that we've been through, where we simply did what we were told and thought what we were told to think, is over. It's on its last legs, at any rate. More and more people all around the world are waking up. And actually the internet, which is, of course, a product of technology, the internet is allowing us to do this. It's allowing us to create communities of ideas. It's extraordinary, really. I have a lot of people come to my author Facebook page, and huge ideas are exchanged there. Sometimes there's very bitter disputes. A lot of arguments are engaged in. But when in the past could I have actually talked to 175,000 other people at the press of a button? I can do that now. I can have this. I can bounce ideas off people and see how they react to it. I benefit, and I do benefit day by day when people send me links or suggestions that I hadn't thought about. So there's this tremendous fertilization of minds that is going on all around the world. And that's something, as far as we know, that never happened before. We live in an extraordinary time, and it's a time that's going to be looked back on in 200-300 years from now as an absolutely transformational moment in human history. So we better make the most of it. We're very lucky to be alive today. It might not feel like that, but we are.
And you can do that and not go to jail.
And you can do that and not go to jail. Yeah,
this is favorite.
And increasingly, people are altering their consciousness despite the fact that it's illegal, because their consciousness, after all, is their own personal property.
This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are speaking with Graham Hancock live. Thank you, Graham, by the way. And let's move on. One basic question, and we've sort of been talking about this, but it's still something that today, with all of our knowledge, why is Darwinism not refuted? Why is it as strong today as ever? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think there's two issues here, really, or perhaps even more than two. The notion of evolution is actually a pretty valid notion. I think it would be foolish to say that no such thing as evolution occurs. It does occur. And I cannot imagine a world in which evolution did not occur. You see, living on planet Earth or on any other conceivable planet, we live in an environment that is largely random. For example, there are all these things like asteroids and comets, and I want to talk a bit about comets later in this show, because I've just finished a 10-day journey across North America, focusing on the Pacific Northwest and looking at the effects of a cataclysmic comet impact just slightly less than 13,000 years ago on the Pacific Northwest, which just changed everything. It changed the whole story of humanity. If we didn't have evolution and there were major cataclysmic events, we would not be able to bounce back and evolve. There have been times when the whole story of life on this planet has almost entirely come to an end, and it's usually been caused by some kind of cosmic impact. It's virtually sterilized the planet. Almost all previous life forms have been wiped out, and we've had to go back to square one. But immediately the new life begins and starts evolving and developing. So I don't think that it's necessary or useful to deny that evolution exists. But to take that fact and then say, and it proves that life has no meaning, and it proves that there is no God, and it proves that there is no spiritual realm, that's illegitimate. There's no case for doing that just because we have evolution. I'm not a big believer in God myself, not in that bearded, angry old bugger who lives up in the skies, called Jehovah or Allah or whatever people want to call him. I don't believe in that demonic entity. But, well, perhaps as a demon, we should consider, because the creature that we call God has been responsible for so much misery, and we have to consider the possibility of supernatural entities which mess with our minds. But if let's say hypothetically that there was such a thing as a God who had actually created life on Earth.
Divine intervention.
Why would that hypothetical being be so stupid as to create life in a fixed and permanent form which could never change? Because unless that entity could control every variable in the universe and snatch out of the sky any 10-mile wide comet that was heading to sterilize life on Earth, he would have to accept that life might face setbacks. And that facing those setbacks, if the project of life was to continue, it would have to be able to evolve, to jump and to jive, to dance around the cataclysm and find a way forward, and perhaps evolve into new forms that are more suitable to the new world that has been created by the cataclysmic event. So I've actually never understood why accepting evolution means that we have to deny the existence of God. Any God worth calling that name, any God with half a brain, would build evolution into the life process right at the beginning. It would be part of the essentials of life.
And we could chart it. We could see it.
Yeah, we could see it.
Yes.
And there's no reason why the two things are mutually exclusive.
Right.
We are physical beings. We live here in the physical realm. I maintain absolutely that we are at heart spiritual beings manifested in physical form, but we have an investment in these physical forms. We want physical life to continue. And in order for it to do so, evolution is incredibly helpful and useful. So I don't see why we should be against that. But what we shouldn't then do is take it the next step further and say that evolution is everything and that it explains everything and that it's all about everything, because it's not. And even Darwin didn't really believe that it was as simple as that. There's a kind of neo-Darwinism, a sort of fanatical branch of science, which does believe it's as simple as that, which believes that by having identified evolution, they've solved every mystery and proved everything. And that is not the case. So I'm not against evolution, but I'm against using it as a catch-all to explain everything.
Yeah, when you look at the astronomical odds, I have no idea how many digits we're talking about, but it would have to be in the thousands. We talked about this earlier. Where does an idea come from? The odds of our DNA being altered to allow us laughter and emotions and ideas and nothing else, and it just happened, and it was just inevitable, is incorrect. And any logical science, I would just think that they would look
or
at
also
it.
to fall in love or to enjoy
Yes.
a beautiful sunset.
Yes.
Or the way we react to an amazing piece of music. I challenge any evolutionist to explain that simply in terms of the 3 pounds of jelly we have inside our skulls. There is more going on than that. Much more. It's much deeper and more profound than that. That's just part of the picture.
It can't be explained away as chance. It just can't.
I don't think it can. And here's an interesting thing, and many of your listeners may be aware of this. I wrote about it in my 2005 nonfiction book called Supernatural, Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind. But when we talk about DNA, who is the high priest of DNA if not Francis Crick? Who, with James Watson back in the early 1950s, solved the double helix form of the DNA molecule. And indeed, Crick won a Nobel Prize for his work on DNA. Well, it turns out that Crick, of course, there were many roots to his knowledge, but Crick admitted to a colleague, and I published the references to this in my book, Supernatural, that he was actually under the influence of LSD when he first got it, when he first really got what the double helix was and how it was the shape and form of DNA and how it worked. In other words, he hadn't come to that through a rational problem-solving route. He'd come to it through vision, through revelation. He saw the double helix in a vision. And interestingly also, Francis Crick in 1981 wrote a book called Life Itself, not very well-known book now, in which he looked at the mystery of the DNA molecule. Now, we would expect a man like Crick to be in exactly the same camp as Richard Dawkins, and in many ways he is. But he had a very radical view of DNA. You see, the mainstream theory is we have our planet Earth, okay? It forms about 4.5 billion years ago, 4,500 million years ago. At first, it is extremely hot, too hot to sustain any kind of life. But down about 3.9 billion years ago, 3,900 million years ago, it is cool enough to support life. And there's a kind of primeval soup, this is what they describe, of molecules all over it. And 100 million years later, 3.8 billion years ago, suddenly bacterial life is all over the planet. Now, the mainstream view is that bacterial life the DNA RNA system arose entirely by accident in just that 100 million year window by molecules bumping against one another by chance in the primeval soup. Sounds, I suggest to you and me, like a ludicrous idea. And here's the interesting thing. It sounded like a ludicrous idea to Francis Crick as well, and to Sir Fred Hoyle, the astrophysicist, because Crick and Hoyle looked at the DNA molecule as a great mystery, and they did not feel it was possible for it to have evolved by any kind of random bumping together of molecules. No matter how many combinations you do, 100 million years is just not enough time to have the planet seething with bacterial life 3.8 billion years ago. So they proposed a theory called directed panspermia. And that brings us very close to some of the concerns and interests with alien intervention in human affairs, in the affairs of life on this planet. Because Crick pointed out that the Big Bang, and by the way, we don't even know for sure that a Big Bang happened, but something happened. It could just be a fairy tale, another of those fairy tales of science. But the Big Bang, if it happened 14 billion years ago. That is 10 billion years, 10,000 million years before the Earth formed. And he suggested maybe there was time somewhere else, far, far away in a distant galaxy on the other side of the universe, for DNA system to have evolved by a chance bumping together of molecules. He was not a great believer in spiritual matters. He wouldn't look for a creator, but he needed more time for DNA to evolve. So he hypothesized a distant galaxy formed soon after the Big Bang where the seeds of life did evolve. And they evolved and evolved, and they eventually became an intelligent being, more intelligent than us, he thought, a highly sophisticated civilization on this distant hypothetical planet. And then the inhabitants of that civilization discover, remember, this is Francis Crick's ideas. This is not Graham Hancock here. I'm just reporting Francis Crick, the Nobel Prize winner. Then his hypothetical advanced civilization on a distant planet discovers that they're going to be wiped out. Let's say that a supernova is going to go off in their vicinity and their planet is going to be sterilized. First thing they would do, Crick suggested, was to try to get themselves off the planet. But they would discover that the distances in interstellar space were too great for their technology and that they would not be able to get living, breathing, fully evolved beings like us to another distant planet on the other side of the universe. So the next thing they would do, he suggested, was they would genetically engineer bacteria stuffed with DNA. They would pack them into cryogenic chambers on top of spacecraft. They would fire those spacecraft out into the universe. And his suggestion is that 3.9 billion years ago, one of those alien spacecraft hit the early Earth, spilled out its contents of genetically engineered bacteria, and began the process of evolution of life on Earth. And what he and Sir Fred Hoyle both said is that you would be more likely to assemble a fully functioning and flying jumbo jet by passing a hurricane through a junkyard than you would be to get the DNA molecule by any kind of chance bumping together of molecules in just 100 million years. That's why they went for directed panspermia. And when I reviewed this in my book Supernatural, I just took it a step further and suggested that maybe written on that DNA, because there are highly conserved sections of DNA, yes, evolution occurs, but we have, for example, 70% of our genes we have in common with fruit flies, you know. Mm-hmm. That's highly conserved sections of DNA which have never changed in hundreds and hundreds of millions of years. Maybe on these highly conserved sections of DNA, maybe if an alien intelligence was behind it, they protected certain sections of DNA so that no matter how much evolution was undergone, those sections of DNA in any species would be maintained. They would be in us today. And maybe there's a message written on them. I hope I'm not getting too detailed or too technical, but there is a linguistic theory called, not theory, a linguistic fact called Zipf's law, which is to do with the relationship of frequency to rank of words in all and every human language. And it turns out that absolute fingerprint of a language is found in what is called junk DNA. That we may have a message written in our DNA, and maybe we have to be in altered states of consciousness in order to access that message. Maybe the archive of a whole civilization is from a distant galaxy is written in our own DNA. At any rate, it's an intriguing idea, and at the source of that idea is Francis Crick, the Nobel Prize winner.
With Crick's idea is a lot easier to wrap your brain around than the odds of molecules bumping around on a piece of a crystal in a creek bed somewhere for eternity until absolute perfection is struck in order.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. Absolutely. I think this is the case. I think it's a very compelling idea, and I think it's an idea that deserves further investigation and further research. I looked into it in some depth in my book, Supernatural: Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind.
Has anybody ever put together the odds of that? Has anybody come up with that number of how long it would take? I thoroughly understand taking longer than 100 million years.
I think Crick and Hoyle actually did do some mathematics on that, but I can't quote you at chapter and verse sitting here
right.
at quarter to midnight in Baltimore.
Oh, man. I can't wait. I can't believe you're going to get out of L.A. without coming by. I could just imagine sitting.
Well, I got out of L.A., I'm afraid.
Oh, no, I mean, I can't believe you got out of L.A. without sitting down. I would have loved to have had
we
you
should have
come
sat down, but we will do next time. I was in L.A. for the best part of 10 days, and then my wife Sandra, who's a photographer, and I did just this spectacular trip across the United States with a great expert in the cataclysms that took place at the end of the last ice age, an absolute genius called Randall Carlson. And we started off in Portland, Oregon, and we drove all across Oregon, all across the state of Washington, across Montana. Somewhere along the way, we crossed a bit of Idaho as well, North Dakota, South Dakota, and into Minnesota. And what we were looking at is the absolute evidence. You know, everybody's heard of the Ice Age, the last Ice Age. The last Ice Age set in 125,000 years ago, and it came to a final end about 10,000 years ago. But somewhere around 13,000 years ago, just as the Earth was emerging from the Ice Age, a dramatic and cataclysmic event took place. And it turns out now that North America was the epicenter of that event, which caused a global cataclysm. And that event was a large comet which broke into multiple fragments. And some of the largest of those fragments hit the North American ice cap. North America, pretty much above the Canadian border, was covered with ice up to 2 miles deep during the Ice Age. And this is why there's no crater, because the fragments of the comet actually impacted this 2-mile deep ice cap and instantly liquidized it and sent an ocean of water flooding south. And you see this most clearly in the Pacific Northwest, in the scablands of the Northwest, which are lands that have been plucked and torn by these gigantic floods in places like Grand Coulee in Washington state, where you have a dry, what are called dry falls. This is the Niagara Falls are the result of thousands of years of slow erasing, cutting back of the earth, abrasion of the land by the river. But in the case of dry falls in Washington state, it is 5 times bigger and 5 times wider and 3 times higher than Niagara Falls, and it was created in less than 2 weeks. And it was created by just an unbelievable flood coming down off the ice cap. And that flood wasn't just water. It was filled with whole forests that had been ripped up from the ground. It was filled with icebergs, many of which contained huge boulders frozen inside those icebergs. We've visited quite a number of places where there are giant boulders weighing 18,000, 20,000 tons, 500 or so feet above a valley floor, made of rock that came from hundreds of miles away, because that rock was entrained in icebergs and was carried there in these horrendous floods. And the floods, which have scoured the northwest of North America 13,000 years ago, were just part of a much wider global disaster that our species passed through. And this touches on my other big non-fiction interest, which is the possibility of a lost civilization, Atlantis by any other name. And I think I now have the smoking gun for the event that caused the destruction of that civilization of remote prehistory.
We were talking earlier, fiction is fun, but for me, your nonfiction is to stun. Okay.
Okay, that's nicely put. That's nicely put.
And it looks like you're about to do it again. And with the last ice age, I live in America, and this question of how and when and what, it really has never been answered. We know it was there, but nobody's really come forward with some conclusive, convincing argument or idea on why it stopped.
Yeah.
Now you are.
We have that now.
Okay, continue. I'm stunned.
Well, before I continue, let me take this opportunity, because we were talking about my novels and my fiction at the beginning, and the series of novels that I've written on the Spanish conquest of Mexico. The name of those novels is War God. The first volume is War God Knights of the Witch, that was published in 2013. It's available from Amazon.com. And the second volume is War God Return of the Plumed Serpent. These are supernatural adventure novels, and Return of the Plumed Serpent will be published on the 9th of October. And I just want to make a special offer to your listeners, which is that if they will support my fiction writing, Graham Hancock as a novelist, not the better-known Graham Hancock who writes non-fiction books, but if they'll support my fiction writing by buying Volume 1 or Volume 2 of the War God series, just go to my website, grahamhancock.com, and you'll immediately see a link that'll take you to the War God page. There's chapters to read free online there. There's links to enable you to purchase the books from Amazon. And there's a special offer that I make at the bottom of that page. And I'll extend that special offer to your listeners, which is that if they will write to me at the email address given in that special offer box, just scroll down the War God page and give me proof of purchase, I will at my own expense send them signed, dedicated book plates. That's a fancy name for a label. The book will come to them direct from Amazon, but I will sign and dedicate a label to place inside their book, and I will do so at my own expense. And I live in England, but I'll send it airmail from England, and I will do this in November when I get home from my present travels. But the offer has to be taken up by about the 10th of October. The second volume of War God is published on the 9th of October. It can be pre-ordered. The offer also applies to the first volume, which is already in print. Take me up on that offer, and I will send you a signed, dedicated book plate to place inside your copy. So that's the message I wanted to send before we turn to discuss my latest nonfiction investigation.
First off, I want to say thank you for that. All I can say is, how cool is that? That is very cool of you. Thank you for that. And we are also here at Fade to Black. I'm going to send you out some books, and I'd like for you to sign them for our listeners, and we'll give those away at a later date. But so expect those. But thank you for
I'll
that.
do that with pleasure.
That's awesome. And I want my own book plate, pal. Okay,
you will have it. I guarantee you, it is yours. Count on it. I'll personally dedicate and sign those book plates.
That is so gracious. Thank you. Before we move on to the comment, a couple of things I wanted to point out. There's a pretty big name out there that's listening to the show right now. His name is Michael Oeming. He's a comic book artist, one of the best in the world. And he posted a picture that he drew of you earlier onto Twitter. And I am going to email that to you, to your secret email.
Okay.
And yeah, but I don't know if you're on Twitter now, but Michael or somebody in Twitter, please retweet the portrait that Michael Oeming did of Graham in front of the pyramids. It's absolutely stunning. And the picture he did of me is in black and white. He did you in color, young man.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I can't wait to see it. I shall go and hunt for it on Twitter.
Yeah, I'll take care of it, and I'll send it to you. Next, what is up, before we get into, we'll spend the last half of the show on the comments, and I do want to get back to Armenia, too. That's where we left off our last conversation.
Yeah.
What is up with you and Joe Rogan? You guys really like each other, don't you? And I've seen all of them.
I really like Joe. I've got to know him quite well since 2010, since I first did his show. I've done his show 4 times now, and I enjoy talking with him. You know what? I enjoy talking with you too. I mean, this is we talked for an hour a few weeks ago, but this is the first time we've had a really thorough conversation, and I'm really enjoying it. There are so many radio hosts, so many podcast hosts who are actually not interesting to talk to, and who do things like require you to provide 20 questions in advance before they'll speak to you because they lack the imagination or the courage to just go into a conversation open-ended. Well, what I appreciate about you and what I appreciate about Joe Rogan is that you guys will go into a conversation with no advanced preparation, no safety net of questions that you can ask the interviewee if you run out of thoughts of your own. You just go into it blind, and the result is a spontaneous, positive, interesting conversation that's interesting to me as the interviewee, interesting to you as the interviewer, and hopefully interesting to our audience as well.
And the reason for that, and I say that thank you for that, because you're absolutely right, but thank you for that. And the reason for that is the listener gets sucked in, and they imagine themselves sitting there with the two of us because it's a natural flowing conversation, and they are eavesdropping.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and that's interesting to me, and that's why this audience has grown like it has, because they get it. If they want to go and listen to some whatever that's out there, and that's what interests them, then go for it. But here, no, it's not that kind of party, Graham. It's you and I sitting and talking.
Well, this is the kind of party I like to be part of. This is fun. I'm finding this conversation stimulating and interesting, and I'm enjoying every minute of it. And that's the key. That's why I enjoy talking to you. It's why I enjoy talking to Joe. I enjoy talking to intelligent people with open minds, which is what I believe our audience is as well.
Yeah, Joe, and I've asked him to come on this show, and his people came back. Well, when you get a little bigger. That was a while ago. Now it's a different situation. Now there's an open invitation there, and I would like to get him on the show. But the thing is, when I sit and listen to Joe converse with you or whoever, his ability to move things along, those 3 hours go by like nothing. It's a finger snap.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You would never think that some UFC bodybuilding pot-smoking comedian has thought processes like that. That guy is deep. He's about as deep as it gets.
He's super smart.
Yes, he is.
Joe Rogan is super smart, and he's very, very open-minded. I mean, what I have in common with him is an interest in psychedelics, an interest in ancient civilizations, and an interest in the martial arts, because don't forget, my novels about the Spanish conquest of Mexico are all about the warrior spirit. So, I find myself on common ground with Joe, and talking about pot. I mean, what did Joe do this time but smoke me up live on air?
I heard about it. I heard all about it. I haven't checked it out yet. But and then didn't you guys, and I don't mean to go off on a Joe Rogan tangent, but
yeah,
weren't you going to go float with him?
Well, I did go float.
Oh, you did do it.
Joe set that up for me. I went to a place called Float Lab Technology in
Venice.
In Venice Beach,
right,
exactly,
right.
in Los Angeles, and I had 2 floats, both of which took place at midnight. And it was the first time that I'd ever floated, and I loved it. I loved it. You go into this huge tank, which is in a completely sealed cubicle. There's room for you to lie out full length, stretch your arms out above your head, and you're lying in body temperature salt water. The water is so salty, it's saltier than the Dead Sea, that you simply can't sink. Your body is just suspended in that. You're in total darkness. You're wearing earplugs. There's no sound whatsoever. And the mind just begins to travel, and you drift. At times I felt like I was floating in outer space. At times I didn't understand the difference between up and down. I sometimes thought I was vertical instead of horizontal.
Wow.
And I just had amazing thought processes while I was there. And so I'm determined to do more of these floating experiences. Again, it's about consciousness, living in the modern world, surrounded by noise, by frenetic energy, by honking horns, by all our worries and cares, by the telephone ringing, by the computer, everything that we're surrounded by, that we're just immersed in this sea of light and noise. And it's incredible for the mind to step out of that, even if only for an hour or 2 hours, into a place where there is no sense energies plunging in on you at all, where you're completely alone with yourself. And you're in silence and darkness, and you don't even feel anything because you're suspended in this body temperature salt water. And then you can begin to re-experience your own mind, which so often in the modern world we don't do. We're just so caught up in anxieties and stress that we forget we've got these amazing things called minds.
It sounds like it should be illegal.
You know what?
That just sounds like
our controlling governments, I'm sure, will seek to find some way to make
right.
it illegal as soon as possible. How dare people actually use their minds and think for themselves,
Well, when Joe was first telling you about it, and I remember the interview, I've seen it a few times, and I remember him trying to sell you on it, to convince you about how extraordinary of an event it was. And really quick, it was all that, wasn't it?
It was all that.
Okay.
I'm going to make it a regular part of my practice.
Are you going to install one at the house?
Well, I'd like to install one at the house. I've been discussing it with my wife. She's a bit against the idea at the moment because, you have to do a lot of water changing, and they're quite big. And they're not cheap either. But if, it's like buying a car. But I'd rather have one of those than a car. I really would, and just that ability to be in silence, to be in that quiet place for as long or as little time as you wish.
Yeah, I was do you know Steve Murillo?
No, I
Okay.
don't.
Well, Steve was the director of MUFON here in LA for like 13 years. And a couple
Right.
of weeks ago, we were out and talking, and that conversation came up about the float systems in Venice Beach. And he knows the owner and so
Yeah.
forth. And he was like, dude, I'm going to take you. It will
Yeah,
change your life.
You got to go. The guy is called Crash.
Yeah,
and
Crash,
he owns
Crash,
that-
yeah.
Crash, and he owns that system in Venice Beach. And they're opening up another 7 pods in a place which I think is called Westwood in Los Angeles. I may have got the name wrong. Westwood. I can't remember. But they're opening up another set of units. You know, so more and more people can have this experience, and it's available and really, really worth having. It's one of those great experiences in life.
Crash must be business coming out the yin yang after this show and Joe and you.
Well, I hope so, because he's a very, very unassuming, very relaxed guy. You know, he just makes you feel very much at home, and he's providing a great service. It's something we all need to do. Find a little time for ourselves.
Okay, let's change gears. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We're talking to Graham Hancock live from the East Coast. I'm your humble host, Jimmy Church. We're only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Okay, let's get back to the comet. Let's get back to this ice age. And I said it, and I mean it. Your nonfiction is to its purpose is to stun. You have done it time and time again. And listening to you now, I'm feeling it coming. I feel another Dawkins moment. You're going to stun. You're going to stun the scientific community once again.
I hope so. I hope it has some impact at any rate. I mean, look, 20 years ago, I wrote a book called Fingerprints of the Gods. It was published in 1995. It's by far the most successful book I've ever written. It was a #1 bestseller in many different countries around the world, even in Japan. And it explored the possibility that there's a forgotten episode in human history, that we have a lost civilization way back when. Atlantis, by any other name. I didn't use the word Atlantis much when I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, because it was a word that seemed to have become devalued. As the time has gone by, I've begun to realize what a valuable word it actually is. At any rate, 20 years later, there is so much new evidence that I feel the time has come, and I've been working on this for more than a year now, working on the research, that the time has come for me to write a sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods. It will not be an update of Fingerprints of the Gods. It will be a totally new book, which presents completely new evidence and information that wasn't in Fingerprints of the Gods, and crucially, which identifies the smoking gun that lost us a whole civilization. See, when I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, I drew attention to the mysterious epoch between 12,000 and 13,000 years ago, between, in other words, 10,000 BC and 11,000 BC. And anybody who knows Fingerprints of the Gods or who reads it will realize that that was the window in which I was suggesting that an advanced civilization not yet recognized by historians, that had existed for thousands of years before that, was wiped out and left survivors who were responsible for many of the later monuments that were built around the world. When I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, I was aware that the problem was connected with the last ice age, but I didn't really have a smoking gun. I suggested quite a number of different possibilities of what the cataclysm might have been. And one of the big changes, and one of the reasons why I'm doing this new research, is that in the last 7 years, since 2007, the evidence has been steadily mounting that the Earth was hit by large fragments of a giant comet 12,980 years ago.
Where did that date come from?
Well, the date comes from really excellent science. There are certain signatures of a comet impact. One of them is a layer of platinum. Another is what are called nanodiamonds. Another is a kind of black mat that results from huge fires that are set in motion by the comet, which produce a layer in the soil of intense carbonization and burning. All of these are datable events, and the datings keep on homing in on 12,980 years ago. Greenland ice cores recently produced the platinum evidence, and just in the last month, more nanodiamond evidence. Again, datable to 12,980 years ago, give or take 5 years. The resolution is that fine. That the Earth was hit by a comet, and it's clear now that this comet was in multiple fragments. Some of those fragments might have been a kilometer or two across. If I think everybody remembers Shoemaker-Levy 9 that hit Jupiter in 1994, we're looking at something like that on a perhaps a slightly smaller scale than Shoemaker-Levy 9, but nevertheless a cataclysmic cosmic visitor. And what is now clear is that the epicenter of the global cataclysm was in North America. As I mentioned earlier, that at least 3 of those large fragments hit the North American ice cap, hit the Cordilleran ice cap and hit the Laurentide ice cap, the 2 main ice caps on North America. Thus not leaving a crater in the ground because the ice caps were 2 miles deep, but instantly liquidizing all of that ice and turning it into water. Now, 2 things happened when that took place. First of all, oceans of water gushed forth from the ice cap, moving at tremendous speeds, and went down over the land that lay beyond, that lay south of the ice cap. These oceans of water, as I mentioned earlier, were filled with debris. They were filled with icebergs themselves, filled with huge boulders. They were filled with forests that had been ripped up by the roots. There was a massive amount of silt. So this was a turbulent, thick, dense flood, not just plain water, but water filled with stuff, which came pouring out over the landscape. At the same time, the vaporization of the water resulted not only in a flood down from the ice cap, but also in huge amounts of water going up into the atmosphere. And thus and that water is carrying up a lot of dirt and dust and debris that is hoisted up into the upper atmosphere by the same effect of the comet impact. And the comet is very hot, you understand. When a comet hits the Earth, this is not a small thing. This is not just an impact. There's a huge amount of heat generated, and off this water vapor containing stuff goes into the upper atmosphere. So you have enormous floods, and then you have a huge quantity of a kind of black bituminous rain, which is pouring down on the Earth. And as I mentioned, I've been traveling with a great expert on all of this, Randall Carlson, and he's been showing me the effects on the ground, and we've been discussing this every step of the way that we've gone along. And what I began to realize is that what he's describing is exactly what's described in the ancient myths. The myth of the flood of Noah, which speaks of a rain for 40 days and 40 nights. The myth of Viracocha in South America, speaking of a time of darkness, speaking specifically of black bituminous rains, of terrible floods scouring across the landscape, of sea level suddenly rising, because when all that water came off North America, it went into the ocean, and the sea level went up dozens of feet virtually overnight.
Now, wasn't there must have been, and I've talked about this before, this is how my brain works, but there must have been a great release of weight as well.
Absolutely, you're spot on. That's exactly right. There was a great release of weight. Those ice caps have massive weight, and they force down the ground beneath them. Now, what happens when you take, the weight of huge mountain ranges of ice off the Earth beneath them is that Earth begins to rebound. It's being pressed down. Now it starts to bounce up again. And when you're in a seismically active area like the northwest of North America, the result is a tremendous amount of volcanic activity is unleashed. Huge earthquakes are unleashed. The whole Earth shakes. And again, this is described in all the ancient myths. And those volcanoes sending up their plumes of black, ashy smoke, that joins with the dark rain clouds overhead and produces this horrible fallout of acid rain all around the world.
And there's no negative or positive without a negative and a positive. So that great release of weight, if the Earth gives here in North America, something is giving somewhere else on the globe.
Okay, again, a very interesting point. And again, I cite Randall Carlson's very interesting work here. North America is pressed down.
Right.
It's like a seesaw. What's being pressed up?
Exactly.
Maybe what's been pressed up is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge.
You're making me feel smart, but it's just my point being, and I want the audience to grasp this. Imagine like a basketball or something inflated. If you push on it, or a balloon, if you push on one side, you can feel it expand on the other side. Well, if that happened in North America, where all of this ice suddenly disappears overnight, then it moves out, and then something somewhere else has got to give drastically.
Yeah, and this could be the explanation for what Plato is our source for the story of Atlantis, for what he describes as Atlantis sinking and being destroyed in a single terrible day and a night.
Bingo.
Just plunging beneath the sea amidst huge earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. A cataclysm so great, as Plato said, that mankind is forced to begin again like children with no memory of what went before. And I am increasingly confident that that's what we are. We are a species with amnesia. We have forgotten a key episode in our own past, and it is remembered in myths and traditions all around the world. This comet impact didn't only hit North America. Interestingly, the European ice cap, which was just as big as the North American ice cap, also went into a radical meltdown at the same time. It looks like other fragments of the comet hit the European ice cap. Then we get this plume of dust thrown up and debris thrown up into the upper atmosphere. It surrounds the Earth with a dark, swirling cloud through which the sun's rays cannot penetrate. And as a result, after the initial flooding and the heat event of the comet, the Earth then goes back into a radical deep freeze. And geologists have known for decades that this happened 12,980 years ago. They just haven't known until very recently what caused it to happen. Now we know it was a comet. And that deep freeze has a name. Geologists give it a name. They call it the Younger Dryas, named after a particular species of flower that flourishes in cold conditions. The Younger Dryas set in 12,980 years ago, and it equally abruptly stopped 11,600 years ago. Is it possible that we interacted again with the debris stream of the comet at that time, which had other effects causing the dust cloud to lift? And interestingly, 11,600 years ago is precisely the date given by Plato for the submergence of Atlantis. He says that Atlantis was destroyed 9,000 years before the time of Solon. And we know that Solon, a historical figure and in fact a distant relative of Plato's, lived in 600 BC. So that's 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago. It's exactly the date of the end of the Younger Dryas, which, like the beginning, was accompanied by flooding and cataclysmic earthquakes, volcanism, and other events. So it's impossible, I think, for this to be a coincidence. Plato was right on the money. We have to start taking Atlantis very, very seriously. Again, it has to stop being a joke.
I don't know how it can be denied. Looking back at the way
You'd be amazed how many so-called serious scholars just sort of scoff and laugh into their sleeves whenever you mention the possibility of a lost civilization. I can't tell you how much flack I took, how many vicious, unpleasant, deeply unpleasant attacks were mounted on me when I published Fingerprints of the Gods in 1995. Whole documentaries were made to destroy my reputation. Because I had dared to suggest that there might have been a lost civilization. Yeah, they couldn't burn me at the stake, but everything was done to neutralize me and shut me up. And I'm grateful to the public for staying with me, and I'm excited that we're now entering a time when new evidence is emerging that is making the possibility of a lost civilization and the cataclysm that destroyed it impossible to deny any longer. It's not just the comet. We have the discovery of archaeological sites that weren't known in 1995. Göbekli Tepe in eastern Turkey, in a part of Turkey that was historic Armenia, as a matter of fact, in the shadow of Mount Ararat. Göbekli Tepe, a 12,000-plus-year-old series of gigantic megalithic stone circles deliberately buried 10,000 years ago. Nobody 12,000 years ago is supposed to have been able to create stone circles on the scale of Stonehenge. That's 7,000 years before Stonehenge. But somebody made Göbekli Tepe. And at the same time that they made this amazing series of stone circles, we also see agriculture apparently beginning very suddenly in that same area. And what I'm suggesting, this was the survivors of a lost civilization who settled in that area, worked with the local hunter-gatherers, taught them architecture and taught them agriculture. The same story is repeated in Indonesia with an amazing site called Gunung Padang, which may be as much as 20,000 years old. And I've been traveling the world for the last year and a half. I've been investigating. I've been back again and again to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. I've been 3 times to Gunung Padang in Indonesia. I have also traveled in the Lebanon, going to see the incredible site of Baalbek in the Lebanon with its 1,000-ton megaliths. And in Armenia, you mentioned Armenia earlier, and Armenia is one of the great forgotten stories of mysterious archaeology. And there are incredible antiquities in Armenia, and I hope to expose those to a wider public in my new research as well.
How do you explain the gap between Göbekli Tepe and Iraq? How do you explain the gap? Because we're talking, 5,000 or 7,000 years there.
Yes, we are, and it's a good question, Jimmy, and an important one. We have a cataclysm between 12 and 13,000 years ago. We have a second cataclysm around 11,600 years ago. Somewhere in this period, I suggest we lose a whole civilization. There are survivors. Now, let me tell you now, if our civilization today, we admire ourselves, we boast a lot, we like to think that we're the pinnacle of human achievement. But if we took a series of comet impacts like those that hit the Earth between 12 and 13,000 years ago, and again 11,600 years ago, if we took a series of comet impacts like that, our civilization absolutely would not survive. We would not make it. We find it hard enough even to deal with something like Hurricane Katrina, or the Boxing Day tsunami. This is 1,000,000 Katrinas. This is horror multiplied by orders of magnitude, and our civilization would not survive it. We would be gone, but some of us would survive, and some of us would have advanced knowledge. We would then go to those parts of the world where there are people who know how to survive. The people who know how to survive in desperate and difficult circumstances are the hunter-gatherers of, for example, the Amazon jungle or of Central Africa. And we would seek to offer them what we knew. And I think that's what you're seeing the fingerprints of on the ground all around the world 12,000 years ago. Now, many of the ancient myths that talk about a lost civilization and that talk about the cataclysm that destroyed it also make another point. They suggest that humanity of that lost civilization had gone astray, that they at one time were a noble and just and good civilization, but that they had lost, if you like, the mandate of heaven, that they had angered the gods, that they had become arrogant, proud, and cruel, that they had gone down a wrong track. And all of the myths in some way implicate humanity in the disaster that follows. It occurs to me that people who thought that way might also feel that now was not the right time to restart full-scale civilization, to get back to a big urban advanced civilization again, that maybe what was needed was some humility, some kind of slow progress rather than rapid progress. And I suspect that that's what we're looking at. We're looking at an ethic, at a philosophy of the survivors of the civilization who said, let's not rush into this. Let's share some of the benefits of what we know, but let's not make the same mistake again. Let's not go down that track again. And I think what you have are, if you like, secret brotherhoods. In Egypt, they were called the followers of Horus, who protect and preserve the lost knowledge, but who bide their time, who wait until the time is right. Perhaps some event is witnessed in the sky, perhaps some particular conjunction of stars and celestial bodies, who wait for the right moment when they say, okay, now is the time to turn the key, to switch civilization back on again. And they're initiatic brotherhoods. They pass down from generation to generation. They recruit from the local population. And then in Egypt, around 3000 BC, in Sumer, around the same time, that key is turned and we get civilization emerging, apparently very suddenly. Also the Indus Valley, also South America, the great pyramids of Caral, 60 miles north of Peru, date from that same period. So I'm suggesting that there is a hidden link between 12,000 years ago and 5,000 years ago, that the knowledge has been preserved, has been passed on, and that civilization has been turned on again. And, small bodies of initiates in something like monasteries would not leave a large archaeological footprint. They might be very difficult to identify, but what is easier to identify is the ideas they pass down. It's why pyramids all around the world, even built at different periods, mirror the patterns of certain star constellations in the sky. It's why pyramids are always connected to ideas about the immortality of the soul. There's a whole system of ideas that seems to be of very great antiquity that has been passed down along with these extraordinary monuments.
You mentioned earlier about junk DNA and
Yes.
information possibly being stored there, coded stuff. And have you ever thought, I've thought about this, and I've talked about this before, have you ever thought about maybe the technology could be stored right there? That knowledge is
Yes.
on a timeline where, okay, 3000 BC, you're gonna figure out the wheel on this date, and it's just
you're going to
inherent.
wake up. It absolutely could be. In fact, again, new science has interesting revelations for us here. DNA, it is being discovered, is a fantastic medium for storing information.
Right.
Already, Martin Luther King's speech and the sonnets of Shakespeare have been written in DNA.
Right.
Potentially the capacity for storage of information on our own biological material, on our own DNA, is greater than all the computers put together in the world. We have that capacity already to do that. And what better way would there be to conserve information? All kinds of disasters and events can rub out written information, can cause us to forget written languages, not to be able to interpret ancient scripts. But if it's in our DNA, then it's there forever. And it can be decoded.
Somebody just tweeted, Leslie just tweeted, there's no such thing as junk DNA.
Exactly, and I agree with Leslie. There is no such thing as junk DNA. That's another one of those stupid things said by scientists. Here's what it comes from. 3% of our DNA is actually involved in the construction of our bodies. That's called coding DNA, which codes for proteins. Which is involved in making our physical bodies. The other 97% of DNA, that's what scientists until quite recently have been calling junk DNA. But I absolutely agree, there's no such thing as junk. It all has a function, it all has a purpose, and part of that purpose may well be to carry a message.
Do you think, this is a direct question, this is just from me to you, but it's a basic question, it's a fundamental question. Do you think there was the divine intervention that we're always talking about, that I definitely feel happened somewhere? The missing link was divine intervention, no doubt about it. But
it depends what you mean by divine intervention.
That's my question. Do you think it could have been purely, just like Crick was saying, extraterrestrial? Or is there just a fundamental creator of the universe that has been around since before our universe?
Well, does it have to be one or the other? Maybe it could be more interesting than that. Maybe what quantum physics is getting to, that we live in a multi-dimensional universe, that there are many dimensions. Maybe that's the case, and maybe the mystery isn't just this physical universe, but realms and realities beyond our own, which shamans call the spirit worlds, but which quantum physicists call parallel universes or parallel worlds. Yes, of course. We have all sorts of intriguing phenomena that are attributed to aliens. I have no doubt that these phenomena are real. Many of these phenomena are real. UFOs are real. But do we know exactly what UFOs are? A great shaman called Pablo Amaringo, who was an ayahuasca shaman and who used to paint his ayahuasca visions, frequently painted flying saucers. And when I asked him what the flying saucers were, are they, vehicles for crossing interstellar space, for coming here from other planets? He said, actually, no. They're vehicles for entering and leaving the spirit world. And when a shaman says that, he's very close to talking about a parallel dimension. Maybe what we have is an interdimensional phenomenon here. Maybe there are levels and layers of reality functioning at different vibrations, and we're so locked into this one vibration, this one state of energy, that we can't see the other. But maybe there are intelligences in all those other dimensions, and maybe they have a great interest of us. I often wonder if the physical universe could be the creation of what shamans call the spirit world, if you like, that maybe consciousness is fundamentally non-physical, Maybe there are non-physical energies and intelligences. I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be. But maybe it's necessary to have a realm which is physical, in which it is possible for consciousness to incarnate. And when I say a realm, I don't just mean our Earth. I mean the entire physical universe as it is visible to us. That's all one level of reality, but beyond that are multiple other levels of reality. Let's not narrow down the scope of our inquiry by confining it simply to this physical universe. Let's consider the possibility of interdimensional contacts, and maybe that's why the UFO and the alien phenomenon is so elusive and so mysterious and so difficult to pin down. Yeah, maybe we are being visited by beings from other planets in this physical universe, but maybe we're also being visited by intelligences from other dimensions, and maybe we need to get to grips with that possibility, which is precisely what shamans do, by the way.
Are you referring to the astral plane when you were?
I suppose we could be referring to the astral plane. I don't want to give these things labels. I just want to say that reality is probably a lot more mysterious than we take it to be, and that we are tuned in to a particular level of vibration, which we call the material realm, but that it is immersed in a sea of other levels of reality. And our great challenge and predicament as human beings is to realize our place in this grand totality, not just in the limited realm that we call the physical world.
This question just came in via email from Renee, one of our producers here. She says, so I have to get this question out to you. I'm obligated. She says, please have Graham comment on Edgar Casey's statements about the misuse of a crystal device or weapon causing the destruction of Atlantis.
Well, very interesting. Again, that comes back and that links into many ancient myths and traditions around the world which speak of a golden age, which speak of a great advanced civilization. You can find the same story in India. Atlantis isn't the only story. You can find it in South America. It's all over the world. And in every case, they tell us that civilization abused its powers, that it began to play with science, that it became arrogant, that it became cruel, that it lost its connection to the true nurturing spirit of the world, and that it brought upon its own head the problems that it confronted.
When you are around the other science guys, the hardcore orthodox, have you had any one of them just whisper in your ear going, okay, Graham, look, man, you're right. I can't say it.
Once or twice. Very rarely, but once or twice. There's a younger generation of scientists coming up now who are much more open-minded than their predecessors. This is, Richard Dawkins. Well, I'm already 64, but Richard Dawkins is a man in his 70s. I mean, there are younger scientists who are very open to these ideas and these possibilities, much more so than we might imagine. Now, of course, they have to fit in to the scientific discipline and they have to respond to their colleagues. But what I find in the heart is that many young scientists are exploring extraordinary possibilities. And I think we're just on the verge of an epoch of incredible discovery and awakening that will benefit us all. It's going to be a wild roller coaster ride. And what a privilege to be alive at this time when that ride begins.
Well, I thought that, I'll be honest with you, I really thought that Göbekli Tepe, as it should, and deservedly so, would have done just that, would have caused all of the history books to get rewritten. It would be something that it should be spoken about as breaking news on CNN.
Yeah, whereas in fact that everybody's completely ignoring it.
Why? I just don't get it. I don't understand. Yeah. I mean, you must have a reason and an explanation for that, and I can't figure it out.
Well, there may be a sinister explanation, which is that there are certain powers and forces in our society that wish to keep the truth about ourselves from us, and I'm open to that possibility. But there's also just the plain, stubborn commitment to an existing point of view that so many, of senior scientists hold, that this is the reference frame through which they view reality, and they refuse to consider any alternative. If they can't fit something into their existing reference frame, they ignore it. And that's what's happening with Göbekli Tepe at the moment. It's by and large being ignored. It should be headline news everywhere in the world, but I hope to do something about that. I hope with the new book that I'm writing now, it'll be called Magicians of the Gods. It should be published towards the end of 2015. I hope with that book to put a rocket under the asses of an established and complacent science, and to set all of this into context, and to show that we really got to get to grips with the truth about our own past.
Before I let you go, would you indulge maybe a couple of our listeners with a couple of phone calls?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to open up the phone lines right now. We've got just a few minutes left. 323-825-5045. 323-825-5045. And now there's a 10-second delay, Graham, between that announcement and the phone calls coming in. So,
well, perhaps I can use that delay to remind listeners of my website, which is www.grahamhancock.com. The special offer that I've made to listeners is on the War God page of that website, easily got to, and also all the upcoming presentations and talks that I'll be giving around the world can easily be linked from the front page of that website. There are buttons to press that will take you to those as well. So grahamhancock.com for further information on what we've been talking about tonight.
Out of all the guys out there, I know you're going to say Robert, Bivol and Shock, but out of all the guys out there, who's the guy that you really think we should be made aware of that maybe we don't know about?
I think you should be made aware about the work of Randall Carlson, RANDALLCARLSON. His website is sacredgeometryinternational.com. Randall Carlson is one of the great unsung geniuses who is revealing to us the truth about our past. And it's been my privilege to spend the last 10 days traveling across the cataclysm fields of the northwest of America, looking through his eyes at the effects of this terrible cometary disaster.
Hi, you're live on Fade to Black with Graham Hancock. Say good evening to Graham. Who's calling?
Hey, good evening, Graham and Jimmy. This is Warren Scott over here in Tennessee.
How are you tonight, Warren?
How you guys doing tonight?
What have you got for Graham?
All right. Back to the mushrooms that Terence McKenna spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
What is
the late
Graham's
great Terence
thought
McKenna?
on-
Yes.
Yes, the late Terence McKenna. He had spoke of these mushrooms being like E.T., not from this world.
Yeah.
Something to do with their genetic makeup and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. As in many other aspects, Terence was so far ahead of his time. And he spoke of the mushrooms as alien ambassadors, that the spores of the mushrooms may propagate throughout interstellar space. And that the interesting thing is that when you take a high enough dose of psilocybin mushrooms, as with DMT, and psilocybin is actually very closely related to DMT, when you take a strong enough dose, you will frequently find yourself in contact telepathically with intelligences who communicate with you. Now, of course, the mainstream materialist scientist will scoff at that and say that that's just your brain on drugs. But Terence was suggesting that this may be the way that the aliens, if you like, seek to communicate with us, that the mushrooms are their ambassadors, and they put us into a state of consciousness where we may readily gain access to those other intelligences.
Terence was, I don't know how to say this, was so smart and was so, I think he was too smart for himself. And
he was a super smart guy.
Yes.
And he was an amazingly engaging speaker. And I believe him to be one of the great liberation thinkers of our time. I think he was an absolutely remarkable man. I never knew Terence. It's my privilege to know very well his brother Dennis McKenna.
Right.
And I've had many conversations with Dennis about Terence, and I'm a great admirer of Terence's work. And luckily, although he passed away in the year 2000 from a brain tumor, Terence is still with us on the internet, and anybody can Google Terence McKenna, McKenna, and gain access to the huge libraries of information of his talks that are out there on the internet. And every one of them is thought-provoking, stimulating, and frankly, mind-blowing.
I think, and I want to say this in the correct way about Terence. I think in his quest, because he had discovered a lot of things with psychedelics and the mind, and his interest in UFOs and ETs and communication and everything. I think he just took it just a little bit too far.
Well, that's true of all great adventurers. You have to be prepared to take things a little bit too far. If you're not prepared to take things a little bit too far, you won't explore that distant frontier. You won't ever quite get there. Nobody said that adventure, true adventure, whether it's physical adventure or adventure of the mind, was easy. Nobody said that it was safe. But we need people in our society who are prepared to take those risks with themselves. And Terence was one of them.
Did you ever have, I just dropped a call. I'm sorry. Just call, everybody just call right back. Have you ever had an ET experience? Have you ever seen anything that you couldn't explain?
Yeah, I certainly have many times, particularly under the influence of ayahuasca. One of the problems I have with the sort of mainstream, if you like, mainstream ET UFO lobby is that they tend to be extremely materialistic, that they want to see everything in mechanical, technological terms. And I don't deny that there are important physical aspects to the ET abduction experience and to UFOs. There certainly are important physical aspects to those experiences, which are undoubtedly true. But I think we should keep our minds open to access to those experiences through changes in consciousness as well. And the most direct contact that I have had with, if you like, alien intelligences has been while under the influence of ayahuasca, the vine of souls, the vine of the dead, as it's called in the Amazon, this powerful psychedelic brew whose active ingredient is dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which, by the way, is a natural brain hormone. We don't know why our brains, particularly, notably the pineal gland, produce DMT, but we all have DMT in our bodies, and ayahuasca gives us an extra dose of DMT, and it does so in an orally active way. DMT is not normally orally active. You normally have to smoke it. But in the case of the ayahuasca brew, it's mixed with the ayahuasca, the leaves containing DMT are mixed with the ayahuasca vine. And the ayahuasca vine contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor that allows the DMT in the leaves to be absorbed orally and can send you on a 4 or 5 hour journey, a deeply reflective, amazing, extraordinary journey into seamlessly convincing parallel realities inhabited by incredible intelligences that communicate with you telepathically. And I have had many encounters with such intelligences. And yes, I accept the possibility that they're not real. I accept the possibility that they're just projections of my mind. But I can tell you at the level of experience, they are very real indeed. And I know many others I've compared notes with who've encountered the same intelligences. So that's why I say, in parallel with our work on the physical side of the UFO and alien mystery, we need to be doing work on the consciousness side. And the psychedelics and that alien ambassador called psilocybin are particularly, which is closely related to DMT, are particularly useful in exploring the consciousness approach to the ET mystery.
Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Graham Hancock.
Hi, I'm Jimmy from Boise.
Hi, Jimmy.
Big fan.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yes, I've read all your books. I follow you, and great interview tonight, Jimmy.
Thank you.
In your investigations with the shamans and also with your science, what have you come up with sound technology associated with consciousness?
Very important. Great question. Thank you. The manipulation and the management of sound can be one of the techniques that we use to put ourselves into a deeply altered state of consciousness. It doesn't have to be a powerful visionary agent like DMT or psilocybin. It's possible to alter consciousness using sound, modulated sound, and it may be possible to do so even more effectively if sound is mixed with the visionary agent. It's notable in the Amazon that particular songs are used to accompany ayahuasca journeys, and they kind of guide the journey on a road into the unknown. So sound plays a key role. And I also think that sound played a key role in the movement and management of gigantic blocks of stone by ancient civilizations in the past. I think they had a way of manipulating matter that we ourselves have not yet begun to even properly understand.
I would love, if I had a time machine, that's where I would go. I want to know how they move that stuff down in Peru or Baalbek but
Exactly.
I really want to see
1,000-ton blocks at Baalbek, 3 820-ton blocks side by side, so closely fitted you can't get a slip of paper in the seams between them, raised 20 feet above the ground. You know, it's just an amazing piece of magic that they did that. And many of the ancient accounts suggest that sound was used, the chanting of priests, the use of certain trumpets and instruments was used to raise blocks like this up.
Hi, Ken. You're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Graham Hancock.
Hey, Mr. Hancock. How you doing tonight?
Hi, I'm doing good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for asking. I had a question. Then you started talking about the stones. I'm like, oh, this is going to be stupid now because that was fascinating. But I just want to bring it up. Just what's your take on spirit animals or just animal spirits in any of your experiences with ayahuasca or anything like that, Mr. Hancock? And I'll take my answer out there. Thank you so much, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Yes, I have had many encounters with spirit animals. It's interesting that in deeply altered states of consciousness, brought on, for example, by DMT, by ayahuasca, by psilocybin, we encounter entities that often take animal form and yet communicate with us intelligently. And in fact, you can go far back into prehistory with this. If you go back to the painted caves of Europe, for example, Chauvet Cave or Lascaux Cave or Pechmerle Cave in France, you will find art that is characteristic art of altered states of consciousness. There's no doubt that those artists in the painted caves 20 and 30 and 40,000 years ago were shamanic practitioners. They were experiencing altered states of consciousness, and when they returned to a normal state of consciousness, they then painted on the cave walls what they'd seen in their visions. And again, what we're looking at is not animals that they hunted or ate, but animals that they saw in a visionary state. And quite often, these animals actually take the form of what are called therianthropes, from the Greek therion, which means wild beast, and anthropos, which means man. Combinations of beast and man, a bison man, a lion man, a wolf man, and so on and so forth. We can find this imagery all over the painted caves. And shamans in hunter-gatherer societies that still survive in the world today may experience encounters in the visionary state with an intelligent jaguar or an intelligent puma, may experience themselves transforming into those forms. It's one of the mysteries of altered states of consciousness, but it's absolutely universal. It's found in every human culture down through history, and it's been reported reliably and continuously by modern volunteers who've been put into altered states of consciousness in scientific experiments. Most recently, Rick Strassman's work at the University of New Mexico in the 1990s.
And another thing happened back then. The cave paintings went from 2D to 3D.
Oh my goodness! Yes,
you know what I mean.
They were extraordinary art. I mean,
it was art. It was art. Yeah, it wasn't a story or a news. It was artwork. It
was art.
It was art.
It was the greatest, some of the greatest art that's ever been created.
No doubt.
It was being created way back then.
Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Indianapolis calling. Say hi to Graham Hancock.
Hey, this is Allison. Hi, Graham.
Hi, Allison.
I just have, well, actually 2 points I wanted to ask you what you thought of.
Okay.
One is concerning consciousness. Everything that we've talked about tonight is about how consciousness is this thread through all of mankind. And second point, isn't it really about the development of consciousness, and isn't consciousness this thread that goes through everything? And are we not supposed to be looking towards what consciousness is more than what provable science is? because I feel that everything that we've talked about has been about, gee, guys, wake up, listen to what's going on in your own head, because that's where the truth is.
Beautifully put.
That's
Beautifully
exactly right, Allison. Thank you.
I completely agree with you, Allison. You're absolutely spot on. It's all about consciousness. That is the key thing. And the mystery is, what are we doing here on this gorgeous, beautiful planet, in this gem of a universe, in these physical bodies, with our mysterious consciousness that science to this day has failed to explain. Consciousness remains the greatest mystery of science. What it seems to me is that we are here for the growth of consciousness. We are here in this physical incarnation to learn and to grow and to develop, to make choices between right and wrong, between dark and light, between good and evil. These choices define us, and by our choices, we may either grow or shrink our consciousness. There is a great deal at stake in this physical life, in this, what my friend James Tiburon calls this university of duality. Duality is not all. There is a universal, an underlying oneness. But what we're here to confront and deal with on planet Earth is duality. And we are here to learn from our mistakes and to make our choices and to define and create our lives, and hopefully to leave this physical life with our consciousness somewhat grown and expanded from when we entered it, and then perhaps to go into many more lifetimes before this. Consciousness is what it's all about. And in order to nurture consciousness, we first of all need to recognize that the society we live in now is massively destructive of human consciousness, that it seeks to chain our consciousness down, to limit us, to control us, to define us, to persuade us that we are just producers and consumers and nothing else, whereas in truth we have a spiritual destiny here, and that destiny is the perfection of our souls. The ancient Egyptians understood that. They understood that this is our opportunity to learn and to grow and to develop. That's what we're here to do, and we need to grab that with both hands. We need to nurture the spirit. We need to manifest love, because love is part of it, and hatred and fear and suspicion, they're no good for us. They don't do our spirit, they don't do our soul any good at all. We have to take hatred and fear and suspicion out of our lives. And you know, each one of us has control and the power of choice over our own individual lives. We may not be able to change the world, but we can change ourselves. If we've made mistakes, we don't have to make them again 10 years later. We can put things right.
Thank you for hanging on with us tonight for this extra 15 minutes. I have to ask you this one last question. This is from Lynn in Australia. She called in and I couldn't pick up on her call, so she just tweeted me. And I've never heard you utter the word that I'm about to utter. I've never heard you say it, I don't think. So I'm just going to throw it out there. Okay. I'm in uncharted territory right now with you. She says, when will Nibiru pass? And will we be caught in that tale? You know, referring to a comment.
I'm working on the whole issue of Nibiru also as part of the research that I'm now undertaking for the sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods. I'm going in depth into the Sumerian texts, and unlike some other writers in this field, I will give footnotes to show what my sources and references are. So if you don't mind holding on until I publish the sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods at the end of 2015, I hope to have an answer for you.
Well, like I said, I knew I was in uncharted territory. I've never heard you cross that line.
I haven't talked about it before. I'm not going to ignore it this time.
Okay.
It's work that needs to be done, and I intend to apply solid thinking to it and a detailed investigation. It will be part of the story that I have to tell.
You're going to stun.
I hope so. Can I mention my website again?
Yeah, actually, it just got tweeted out a couple of questions. All of the links to Graham are on jimmychurchradio.com. You can click on his name, and it'll take you straight over. But it is Graham Hancock.com.
Yeah,
please
and there's
go.
links there to the special offer I've made on my novels. There's links to all my upcoming presentations and events. There's a massive information there. Please do come, and also to my author Facebook page. That's linked off the opening page of my site as well.
And Michael Oming just sent me a couple of drawings for you. I will be sending you those emails immediately after the show. Please go and check. He's just absolutely amazing. All right.
Looking forward to it.
Before we wind up, what are you doing next? You're on your way back to England. What can we expect next?
No, I'm not on my way back to England.
What are you doing?
Actually, I'm going from here. I'm in Baltimore. Our son lives in Baltimore. We're having a little bit of R&R, recovering from that long trip across the United States. When I say we, that's my wife Santha and I. We're leaving Baltimore. We're going to New York. I'm giving a presentation at the National Arts Club in New York on the 9th, Thursday this week. On the 12th, I'm speaking at the Horizons Conference in New York. Again, all the links for this are found on the Talks and Events page on my website, which you can easily link to if you go to grahamhancock.com. Then we're getting in a plane, and we are flying to South Africa. And I am doing a week of research in South Africa.
You hanging out with Tellinger?
I am absolutely going to be seeing Tellinger. I've known Tellinger for some years, and I'm going to be looking at some of the mysteries that he's been investigating. I'm going down to South Africa to do research, but I'm also giving 2 full-day presentations in South Africa, one on the 18th of October in Johannesburg, and the other on the 25th of October in Cape Town. And again, all the links are on my website, grahamhancock.com. Finally, after that, 27th of October, back to England, and then I need to do some writing.
Good for you. Thank you. It was just fantastic, and I can't wait to get you back on the show. And when you do come back to the States, you know you and I are going to hang out here in L.A. And
we absolutely are. I'm going to come and see you in L.A., and we'll do this face-to-face, and it'll be great.
We'll do it right. Thank you, Graham.
My pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Graham Hancock, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Wow. Oh, I had a big speech prepared for after that, and I can't even think after that. Ladies are swooning. Oh, man. Everybody, are you happy? I'm going to look over at Twitter right now. I just want everybody to say, thank you, Graham. Okay, please. And tweet to Graham directly and let him know how much you appreciated that. We really jumped through some stuff to get him on the show tonight. And so there you go. Okay, he was so busy over this last week what he was doing. And for him to pull this off tonight for everybody, and he promised me just ask whatever you want. We were limited on the last show. He said this show, it was all on the table. And I just got to tell you, it was cool because I just felt that I could let my head go. And I did just that. So I seriously want Graham Hancock in all of these tweets. You can just tweet. I think, what is it? At Graham_Hancock. There you go. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Thank you, everybody. It means an absolute mountain to me to thank him. And with that, listen, I have to take a break, and I will be right back after this. I got to do it, and I'll explain later. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us, everybody. Email Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com, and I'll bang out some tweets. And a bunch of email came in. I tried to get all the questions in, and I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com. JJZR in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
You guys make me so proud. You have no idea. Thank you for that. Fade or Not's rule. Make no mistake about it. Everything that you just did, I just watched all of this flash by, and keep it going at Graham Hancock, and thank him for that. That was absolutely extraordinary. And I was expecting Michael Oming to call in. Why, Michael? What's up, my brother? I expected Michael Oming. Hey, Lynn in Oz, Lynn, my dear, I couldn't pick up your call. I tried. I could not do it, and it was very strange. And I thought that all of the software programs were fixed, and everything was smooth sailing until Lynn called. And of all everybody's important. We all know that, but we all know Lynn runs the show here, and I couldn't pick up on your call. And then after all of that, she says thank you. And again, Lynn, I seriously tried. There's one call coming in. You've got 30 seconds before we run credits. Who's calling? Where are you calling from?
Santa Clara. This is Bear.
Hey, Bear.
And I just want to say, boy, I'll never think about bacon and mushrooms the same way again.
Thank you, Bear. Oh.
You're welcome.
Hey,
have a good one, sir.
Hey, we'll see you tomorrow night, man.
All right. Hang in there, bro.
It's all good, Bear. You know that. Thank you, man.
Yeah, and say hi to the crew.
I will. Right now, we're doing it live.
Okay.
Thanks, Bear. That's Bear, everybody. Had to get the last word in tonight. Again, thank you, everybody. That was just an absolutely wonderful, perfect show. It couldn't have... you just can't fake that kind of stuff. That was the real deal, man. Wow. Tomorrow night, Scott Wolter, America Unearthed. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about, I'm going to leave you with this thought. There are critics out there of Graham Hancock. There are critics out there of L.A. Marzulli and his Giants research and his Nephilim research. There are critics out there of Graham Hancock. Tomorrow night, there are critics out there of Scott Wolter. We need guys like these guys that are on the show this week, and it was all done intentionally. We need these kind of guys and these kind of thoughts. For Scott to go out there like Graham and like L.A., to go out there and try to bend the paradigm and try to go against the grain and ask questions are exactly what this show is about. And if you are angry, if I get you angry and you're just like, what are you doing? You know what? You are the person that this show is for. That's right. I cannot wait for tomorrow night. Scott questioning everything, the rune stone, the hooked X, Vikings in America, Egyptians here, all of that is what this show is about. End of it. So, that's it. Thank you, Graham Hancock. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's executive producers, Rita Kamarian. Shows produced by Hilton J. Palm, Mark D. Kovar, Leslie Johnson III. Fade is by Dale Romero. Graphics by Method of Signaling. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Music is by Doug Aldrich. Intros by Spaceboy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your humble host. We'll see you tomorrow night with Scott Wolter. See ya.